swings in the travel companies. The S&P 500 Airlines Index had been up 6 days in a row and had risen 47.5%. That was the biggest gain over any 6-day period since that index was first calculated more than 3 decades ago. So, we have had this sort of run of speculative buying, which arguably kind of reached a peak yesterday when we saw energy stocks taking off. I mean, Chesapeake Energy may be the best example of that. Up almost fivefold in the past 2 days, and today halted. Possible bankruptcy filing coming. At least we've reported on that with people with knowledge of the matter. So, it's kind of hard to pick out a more sort of obvious example of people kind of casting their skepticism to the wind here and taking advantage of the gains while they were there. And, today it may end up being a very different story for Chesapeake shareholders. Energy stocks in general are not doing well either. So,
Dave, can you explain to me this whole Hertz story here? I thought this company was going bankrupt, and I look at the chart, and it's just kind of spiked up over the past couple of days on the upside, and now today it's off 20%. The trading was halted a couple times this morning. What is really going on with my good friends at Hertz? I'm a gold member there at Hertz, so I kind of hope they survive.
Well, I am too, Paul. Not that I do all that much in terms of car rentals, but I'll tell you, it's another example of that sort of speculative trading that we've really seen arguably since Memorial Day, to some extent at least, and has picked up in the last few days. Hertz actually filing for Chapter 11 protection and then taking off. You see these things happen from time to time, so these frenzies of buying, arguably, and people kind of forgetting that, if you're in a Chapter 11 proceeding, you may end up with shares that are worthless in the end. So, that hasn't deterred people clearly in the case of Hertz, and it doesn't look like it's deterring them in the case of Chesapeake Energy either, depending on how that situation shakes out.
Just on a slightly different subject, Dave, SoftBank's Vision Fund, of course, we're following this so closely. It's such an interesting story, but it's preparing to cut staff by about 15%, so as many as 80 employees for the London-based Vision Fund. And of course, the fund has been doing some interesting things, but also some wild things in the market. And I think that this is just another, example of how it's cutting back on its spending because it just has to, because some of the things that it's done have gone very, very wrong.
Absolutely. With WeWork sort of front and center, the initial public offering that never happened and the issues that they have with their business going on. Of course, the other side of that is that, just yesterday, you had this SoftBank-backed company called Lemonade, which provides home insurance online, file for an initial public offering. So, with a company as big and diverse as SoftBank is, especially in terms of their investments, some things work out, sure, but there are a whole lot of others that haven't, and the company's been suffering because of that.
Dave, I know you read a lot of the strategy work coming off of Wall Street Journal and everybody's lists here. Are people really starting to kind of ring the bell that maybe valuations have just gotten way too ahead of themselves given the earnings cuts we've seen and the big moves we've seen up in the equity indices?
There's been a lot of that, no question. A lot of focus on what they call forward earnings, the whole idea of, what are profit estimates looking like for the next 12 months. Of course, there's a real question there because in a lot of cases, you're not even going to have profits, when you consider with the S&P 500 analysts looking for a 44% decline in earnings in the second quarter, and a whole lot of the areas in the market, they're going to end up with losses instead of profits. So, we'll see how all those numbers shake out. Yeah, but it's clear that, if you're buying stocks now, you're kind of factoring in next year's earnings. But I did see one research report today that suggested, stocks are even expensive when you look at 2021 projections for profits. So, it is definitely an issue in this point, valuation, at least for a whole lot of strategists and investors as well.
And let's not forget that things like deals have been put on hold. So once M&A gets underway again, we could be seeing even more, fire in this market. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we'll have Tara LaChapelle on that, on the kind of the deals market in a pandemic world, what's going on there. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. We appreciate that. Ivani, it's interesting. We're seeing the markets here pull back, and to me, kind of being in the markets for over 30 years, this just feels like a calm, kind of step back. Let's just reassess a little bit. We've had a big move up, and in the absence of any significant economic news, maybe just a chance to kind of catch your breath a little bit. But we're looking at the S&P off about a little more than 1%, the Dow off about 1.25% here. So just a little bit of a pullback right here as we trade on Tuesday. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for world and national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, after nearly 2 weeks of protests sparked by the police killing of an unarmed black man in Minneapolis, that man, George Floyd, will be laid to rest today. The private funeral at Fountain of Praise Church in Floyd's hometown of Houston will be live streamed. The church's co-pastor, Mia Wright, says the service will include calls for justice and social reform. The protests have led to calls to defund the police and a promise from Minneapolis City Council members to dismantle their city's police department. Democrat Ilhan Omar represents Minneapolis in Congress.
No one is advocating for a community that does not have the ability to have public safety. And so what we are advocating for is a reorientation.
Joe Biden's presidential campaign says he does not support defunding police, but does see an urgent need for reform. Biden tells CBS News police departments should meet certain standards before they get federal funding. President Trump is lashing out at that elderly protester in Buffalo who was left seriously injured when police shoved him to the ground. On Twitter, the president called 75-year-old Martin Gugino a provocateur and said he may have fallen harder than he was pushed. He also claimed Gugino might have been trying to tamper with police equipment by scanning it. He cited a report from a fringe conservative media outlet. A New York City police officer is expected to surrender today, more than a week after he was caught on video shoving a woman to the ground and cursing at her during a protest against police brutality there. A law enforcement official tells the New York Times Officer Vincent Durandria will be charged with misdemeanor assault, harassment, and menacing. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
People love a good story. They like it even better when that story is real.
Is this something strange in the numbers?
Paul Sweeney.
That seems like a big miss to me.
Bonnie Quinn.
New funds getting started in order to take advantage of what might be a moment.
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern.
If Russia does throw this spanner in the works, what does it do to relations going forward?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
How important is that statement there?
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council. For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise. in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath, or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway, or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage. Yeah, that moment. Feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Thanks to National Lottery players, the Help a Squaddy initiative are now providing mental health support online for veterans like Darren.
Thank you.
And £600 million of National Lottery funding is on its way to thousands more local projects in England and across the UK during these exceptional times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks fall as an uptick in U.S. COVID cases and grim economic projections took some of the wind out of the June rally. The retreat follows a 6-day rally that did push the S&P back into positive territory for the year and propelled the tech-heavy NASDAQ to a record high. We look at those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. Off earlier lows, the S&P is down 1.1%, down 36. The Dow's down 1.3%, down 352. And the NASDAQ is down 0.5%, down 46. The 10-year is up 21/32 with a yield of 0.8%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down over 1% at $37.78 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 1.3% at $17.2760 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.82. The euro's $1.1342. The British pound $1.2714. This month's filings from Libby and APC Automotive Technologies pushed bankruptcies from the consumer cyclical sector to the highest in 11 years, according to Bloomberg data. The 31 year-to-date filings compared to 35 in the corresponding period in 2009. And the sector remains under pressure from state-imposed lockdowns that have crushed demand. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
It is day one of the two-day FOMC meeting, a highlight for interest rate strategists in their calendar. So who better to bring in right now than the chief U.S. interest rate strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, Ira Jersey. Ira, welcome and thanks for joining. Listen, the Fed's two-day meeting today is going to be extremely interesting, but will the Fed actually announce any kind of move?
Yeah, thanks, Vonnie. I don't think so. In fact, we're not expecting any major changes. I think the devil at this meeting is going to be in the details. So we wouldn't be surprised if the New York Fed, after the initial statement comes out, says that it's going to start buying T-bills in some size. That's something that the Federal Reserve has avoided doing. But now as we get T-bills upward of $5 trillion outstanding, which is more than double from where it was before the COVID crisis, I think that the Federal Reserve might consider buying some bills. And then secondly is what is their thought in yield curve control? So Chair Jerome Powell will have his press conference after the meeting, and I'm sure that will come up as one of the discussion points, especially given that it was hinted that some members of the FOMC want to do a program like yield curve control in the minutes that was came out in the minutes of the last meeting.
Ira, how do you think the Fed is kind of factoring in that jobs data we saw last week with a real surprise to the upside there?
Yeah, I think that they'll still be a little bit cautious. You know, a lot of the data that we're seeing is skewed in one way or the other. There's a lot of strange factors going on. I mean, it was better than expected, but you know, when you consider that, yes, we may have created 2.5 million jobs in May. The fact is, we still have a 13% unemployment rate. So that's not good, right? That's higher than we had during the last recession. So I think that the Fed will certainly look at that as a positive sign, but they're not going to suggest that we're out of the woods yet in terms of the economy having turned up. Although as different economies slowly start to try and open, even amid continuing fears of COVID, will likely they'll probably show some cautious optimism that what they're doing now is going to continue to help the economy.
Ira, when will it be possible to tell if the unemployment rate we're seeing now is due to actual resilience in the economy or whether it's really just the incentives built into the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program?
Yeah, that's a good point. We really probably won't know until probably September, October time period when we've got a few payroll reports under our belt, as well as we just continue to see how the economy progresses without significant fiscal stimulus. I wouldn't be completely surprised if there was another round of fiscal stimulus that's being touted. I think, though, in this politically charged environment, it might be difficult to actually get anything done, especially prior to the election. So I maybe give it 50-50 odds, basically, of another $1 trillion of stimulus or not. I think what's important, though, Vonnie, remember, we're only getting the Main Street lending program going now. And that is a program that is really designed for small and medium-sized businesses to be able to get inexpensive loans to continue their operations. In fact, you don't even have to repay any of the principal for the first 2 years under the new way that the program has been designed. So really is inexpensive financing until we get kind of over the COVID hump, call it in 2021. So as that gets going, that will certainly help the job numbers at least stabilize, if not actually improve a little bit from here.
Do we know, or what do we know, Ira, about what the Fed has actually been buying in the marketplace?
Yeah, so they continue to buy a lot of treasuries, $4.5 billion of treasuries a day, plus mortgages and mortgage-backed securities. And interestingly, they haven't, as far as we know, they haven't been buying any individual corporate bonds in their corporate bond buying program, but they have been purchasing ETFs. So they actually have purchased about, if memory serves, $6 billion of ETFs, so not even a massive amount, but they've been buying mostly intermediate-term corporate bond bond funds in that purchase program, about $1.3 billion a week. So not a ton, but they are buying some of them. And I think just given the fact that credit spreads are so tight, I very much doubt that they're going to be buying many individual securities at all, really, in that program.
Ira, real quick, how does the Fed put yield curve control on the table, if it does? Is it just with language?
So I think that they would actually have a program. I don't think it's likely this meeting, but maybe in August or September, they might institute it, where basically they will say, we don't want 10-year yields to go above 1%. And as they do that, we will buy bonds in sufficient size to be able to keep the market at or below that level in terms of yield. So I really think that's how they'll implement it, and they'll just say that that's how they're going to do it.
Ira Jersey, Bloomberg Intelligence interest rate strategist, joining us here, giving us his thoughts, as always, on kind of what we should be expecting from the U.S. Federal Reserve. And Vonnie, it's interesting, the Fed, I think, generally gets good remarks for its performance here during this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Started to go to work fast and smartly. And of course, as Ira said, there's plenty of ammunition still left. And of course, the Fed will always tell you they have more tools in the box that they don't need to use quite yet.
Exactly right. Looking at the markets here, quick data check here. The S&P off 27 points. That's 0.8%. The Dow off, again, about 0.8%, 235 points. Puts the Dow at 27,289. Remember, the high was 29,000 and change, so a tremendous rebound off of the bottom. We actually have the NASDAQ up slightly, up about 0.3%. 99.12 is the move on the NASDAQ. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. The S&P 500 halting a surge that drove the benchmark higher for 2020. After a record-breaking rally that added $21 trillion to global stock markets, equities are falling this morning, the Dow dropping 370 points. Federal Reserve policymakers begin their two-day meeting today. It's mostly a given that interest rates will be left unchanged. It's official. The record-long expansion ended in February. That's according to the National Bureau of Economic Research that serves as an arbiter of America's business cycles. The academic panel also said the depth of the downturn warrants it to be called a recession, even if it turns out to be brief. And burgers are back at Wendy's. Closed meat plants disrupted Wendy's supply chain. That resulted in some menu items being in short supply and prompted the company to focus on chicken products instead. The fast food chain said beef supply has returned to near normal levels as plants return to operations. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labour market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing. so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Get your cook on with Asda. With Uncle Ben's rice, 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets, only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown!
Search Classic Game Replays to listen for free.
Ready for a one-of-a-kind look at the NFL? On the PFF NFL podcast, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Munson interpret the unique stats of Pro Football Focus to analyze the league, uncover secret superstars, and discuss which teams to watch out for in the next Super Bowl.
Let's talk some football. Let's do it, Steve. All sorts of stuff. We're going to do most improved defenses around the NFL. Solomon Wilcots, our very own. He went into some detail over at PFF.com. Most improved defenses around the
Search PFF NFL on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
This is Mike Golick Jr. from ESPN's Golick and Wingo. Every morning, Wingo, Dad, and I sit down and discuss all the news, drama, and highlights spinning the sports world that day. And with TuneIn, you can hear us whenever and wherever you go. Just search Golick and Wingo to start listening today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at the M&A market. M&A bankers no longer jet-setting around the world to get deals done. How are they working? Plus, retired Navy Admiral James Stavridis, former military commander of NATO and a Bloomberg opinion columnist. He's going to come on to discuss his column entitled, Why Military Leaders Like Me Are Speaking Out. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Well, it was a screeching halt that's eased up a little bit, Paul. The S&P did stop its surge that drove the gauge higher for 2020, led by energy companies and banks. Small cap shares slumped after a 10% advance in the Russell 2006 June sessions. Airlines, cruise operators, travel stocks all faltered. Macy's, however, soared after announcing it has reopened 450 stores in one capacity or another. We look at the markets every 15 minutes. S&P is down 1%, down 32. Dow's down 1.1%, down 307, and the NASDAQ is down 0.25%, down 26. The 10-year is up 19 seconds. The yield is 0.81%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is now down 0.4% at $38.05 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.4% at $17.2840 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.84. The euro $1.1342, and the British pound $1.2718. U.S. job openings plummeted for April to the lowest since 2014, and separations remained elevated as the pandemic rips through the labor market with devastating speed. Yes, the JOLTS report is out. The number of available positions dropped to 5.05 million from a revised 6.01 million in March. That is a Bloomberg Business Report. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 10:33 on Wall Street. Time for Bloomberg Opinion. Let's turn to Bloomberg Opinion columnist Tara LaChapelle. She covers entertainment, telecommunications, and deals for Bloomberg Opinion. Tara, thanks so much for joining us here. You know, I'm a big fan of the M&A market. Like to see deals come across the tape. Usually on that merger Monday, we see some big deals. And the first thing I do when I see a deal, a story out, is I go to the bottom of the story to see who the advisors are on the deal. Talk to us a little bit about what's happening in the world of M&A. How are bankers getting deals done?
Yeah, so I mean, the world of M&A is very old school in that it all still revolves around meeting in person. You know, the handshake is the final way to seal the deal, and it's a lot of travel. And, you know, I think some bankers, you know, would still be willing to get on a plane for, you know, something, $100 billion deal like the AstraZeneca talks that were reported over the weekend with Gilead. But at the same time, I think, you know, a lot of people are still reluctant to travel. A lot of CEOs, especially at companies that are a bit more tech savvy, like Verizon, we saw this with, for instance, are willing to look at doing pretty sizable deals, negotiating them over things like Zoom video conferences. In the case of Verizon, just a few weeks ago, they bought a company called Blue Jeans Networks, which happens to be a video conferencing company a lot like Zoom. And so they bought a video conferencing company, but they also negotiated that deal over video chat, which is just really unusual for the M&A world. And I think it's something more and more bankers and CEOs are going to start to embrace in these next few months and quarters as, you know, people are still a little bit hesitant to go completely back to normal.
So, Tara, in your opinion piece today, you point out that M&A is actually down 50% this year, but may pick up eventually when things start to reopen a little wider across the United States. But in terms of these deals that you are seeing, that $400 million deal for Blue Jeans Networks, for example, are they because of the pandemic or had they been envisaged before the pandemic?
I think, you know, what we're hearing is that there were deals that were probably in the works just before the pandemic, maybe even some transactions that were pretty close to getting announced or, you know, getting close to agreeing on the terms at least. And then the crisis hit and it kind of just puts everything on hold. It would make sense for bankers to kind of go after those deals first and try to get those across the finish line now, if the strategic logic is still there and if you can still come to some sort of agreement on the price, which is obviously difficult. We're seeing that in the case of Tiffany and LVMH, where they probably both still want to do the deal, but the price may not make as much sense at this point. But then I think there are other industries where, you know, some of these companies are still flush with cash. They still have growth needs, and it probably makes sense if they can get any companies a little bit cheaper because of this, that it makes sense to do that. Of course, there's not a whole lot of opportunities for it since the market is up the way it is. But I still think, you know, all roads are going to lead to deals with this. I think there's just a lot of pent-up demand and a lot of companies that need the growth.
So, Tara, what are you hearing about when you talk to bankers across the street and other sources you have? I mean, is the expectation that the M&A market's really not going to come back until we really, you know, get a vaccine and kind of put this pandemic behind us? Or is there a sense that, you know, companies and bankers and lawyers can adapt and can kind of start getting things done even beforehand?
Well, we'll see. I do think, though, that bankers are going to try their darndest to try to get deals done. You know, I think that they know there are companies that were on the lookout for deals before this. So why not keep trying, and why not try to adapt to this, you know, new normal, if you want to call it that. You know, we are seeing, you know, Intel did a deal over Zoom video chat. As more and more companies become comfortable with, you know, not meeting as often in person, not doing as much travel, having to do due diligence in new kind of inventive ways, you could see some companies more comfortable with that than others. You know, some industries it might just be hard to do. Like I've heard investors kind of half jokingly say that a big oil giant that wants to survey some land for a beleaguered oil company somewhere in America could use a drone, let's say, to try to look at that land and look at that property, which I don't know how feasible that is, but I do think people are starting to think, you know, how can we look at this differently and still get deals done?
Yeah, and I mean, definitely drones are being used in all sorts of sectors. Why not this one, right? Talk to us about companies also getting ready for an onslaught of interested buyers. You cite a statistic which states that more than 24 public companies adopted so-called poison pills between March and mid-April. Why is that?
Yeah, this is fascinating. So a law firm, I believe it was K&L, they said that more than 24 U.S. companies have adopted poison pills, which is a lot more than we saw last year. And I think that tells you that there are vulnerable companies that were probably, their businesses were shut during these lockdowns and really affected by the lack of consumer demand, that they are worried about activist shareholders coming in now or opportunistic buyers. PE firms are going to be on the prowl. And I think they're starting to put their guards up and say, we don't want to be bought on the cheap. We don't want to be, taken advantage of in this crisis. So you're starting to see some companies put up their defenses. But I think it's interesting because just the environment that we're in right now, there's been a lot of social activism over inequality. We have the unemployment rate as high as it is. It's a really touchy thing to have an activist campaign or a PE company, using this as an opportunity like that.
Tara, thank you so much for joining us. We always love having you on. Tara LaChapelle, entertainment, telecommunications, and deals columnist for Bloomberg Opinion. You can read Tara's work at Bloomberg.com/opinion, plus all the other great opinion columnists that we have. You can also get it at OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal. The Bloomberg Opinion folks do outstanding work. I highly recommend it. Right now, let's head down to our Washington, D.C. studios for the national headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, George Floyd is being laid to rest today. The man whose death at the hands of Minneapolis police has sparked global protest will be buried beside his mother after a private funeral in Houston. As that service begins, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is asking for an 8-minute, 46-second moment of silence at noon Wall Street time. That's the length of time fired officer Derek Chauvin put his knee to Floyd's neck. All this a day after congressional Democrats introduced a series of police reform measures. Senator Kamala Harris tells ABC's Good Morning America it's not about defunding the police.
This is about the fact that good policing is good for America, that racism hurts all Americans regardless of their race.
Harris is considered a potential choice to be Joe Biden's running mate. Biden says he doesn't support defunding police either, though he has called for more spending on community policing and body cameras. There's new evidence emerging in the police killing of a black man in New Jersey. About a dozen audio and video recordings have been released, showing a state trooper fired his handgun 6 times, killing Maurice Gordon during a traffic stop last month on the Garden State Parkway. New Jersey's Attorney General has also identified the officer for the first time as Sergeant Randall Wetzel. The case will be presented to a grand jury under a 2019 law aimed at holding law enforcement accountable. It's a primary election day in 5 states, and with all of them allowing some kind of mail-in voting, it could be a preview of things to come in November. There have been long lines reported in Georgia, where Democrats at one precinct reported all the machines were down. Atlanta's mayor is encouraging voters to stay in line and request provisional ballots. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Market upheaval.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Dear Dad, Happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
How do you keep track of all your favorite stations and podcasts? Easy. You add them to your favorites list. Just find the audio you want to bookmark and tap the heart icon. Then, whenever you want to browse your favorites, you'll find everything under the Favorites tab.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Sponsored by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting Witham.com. Stock slide on concern. The blistering rally in risk assets overshot economic prospects. Treasuries jumped. Let's take a look at those numbers as we do every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is down 0.75%, down 24. The Dow's now down 0.75%, down 210. And the NASDAQ is up 0.1%, up 11. The 10-year, as we speak, is up 17/30 seconds with a yield of 0.81%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.9% at 37.86 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.2% at 17.2590 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.82. The euro $1.1351, and the British pound $1.2719. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen obviously a rise, a surge, if you will, in civil unrest, public demonstrations stemming from the death of George Floyd and the use of police force against minorities. And there's actually been the use of various forms of the U.S. military to deal with this. A number of retired generals and admirals have spoken out with alarm really about adding active duty military to law enforcement and using the Insurrection Act to get that done. We are so fortunate this morning to have retired Admiral, Navy Admiral James Stavridis, former military commander in NATO and a Bloomberg opinion columnist, to join us. Admiral, thanks so much for taking your time. You wrote a column just recently about using U.S. active duty military for some of these civil issues. Give us your thoughts and that you want to express, as well as some of your colleagues in senior military.
Sure. Let's start, Paul, with just kind of doing the numbers around the country and matching the challenges with what resources are available. So in this country, there are close to 1 million law enforcement officers. And then we also have 500,000 National Guard. These are uniformed personnel. They're associated with the Department of Defense. But key difference, they work for governors. They're citizen soldiers. They're not full-time soldiers. So when you add up law enforcement and National Guard, it's 1.5 million. I have not seen anything in the challenges of protecting these protesters, making sure these demonstrations stay peaceful, stopping any violent crime, stopping looting. Those are all real challenges, but it is a set of challenges that 1.5 million men and women can handle. So my view, and that of many of my senior military colleagues, is don't take the active duty military who are sworn to uphold the Constitution of the United States, who have a significant role defending the nation outside of our national borders. Don't bring those active duty folks inside the country and apply them against protesters. Not an appropriate use of the Department of the Defense active duty personnel.
Yeah, Admiral Stavridis, it's Vonnie. Just on that note, I mean, it's very unusual to see retired officers speaking out about a candidate or a party, or particularly what a president might say. And we saw it this time. We not just saw it from one, but we saw it from several. 4 former chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, in fact. So it's not just that it's ill-advised. It's actually being condemned, would you say?
It is, and this is a really important point, Vonnie. I've never seen the entire active duty 4-star military community so significantly united on a key issue. So it goes from people like General Mattis and General Kelly, who were actually part of the administration at one time and have been very reticent about speaking out, across the spectrum to people like Admiral McRaven or General John Allen, who have been fairly critical of the president, to people like myself who are kind of centrists, who are in the middle. As you mentioned, 4 chairmen of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's really quite remarkable to get that unanimity of view across this whole community. And it's because it really touches a nerve when you send active duty military against the citizens of this country. It should only be done in extreme circumstances. And this does not appear to be a moment that would call for that.
Admiral, on Sunday, Colin Powell, the former Joint Chiefs Chairman and Secretary of State, called out Republican lawmakers for really having, quote, nothing to say about President Trump's militarization of protest security. What is your sense of kind of what your expectations are for what Congress should be doing here as it relates to the military's use?
Well, I stand with General Powell on this, and I think the way to phrase it is the way you just did, Paul, is it's not incumbent just upon Democrats or just upon Republicans to stand up in this moment. And this really touches on why are these protests occurring. This is a significant moment in American history. We need the Congress to be part of the solutions. And so that runs the gamut, I would say, from initiating appropriate reform in police departments around the country. It includes calling on the administration, the executive branch, not to use active duty military against peaceful protesters. It includes providing resources to address the economic impact that comes out of COVID. So we need our Congress to step up on all those kinds of issues. I have tried to shine a spotlight on this issue of active duty military not being used against these protests.
Yeah, Admiral Stavridis, you just said a few moments ago that this is not the moment for it. Do you ever envisage that there might be a moment for it, that the active military would be called out against U.S. citizens?
I think it's unlikely, but it has happened a couple of times in our history. Once was most recently in the Los Angeles riots in the early 90s. And here's a key distinction, Bonnie. If we are going to bring active duty in a moment like that where a city is on flames and there's really no semblance of order in the city, it's got to be under local authorities. It can't be driven from Washington, D.C. in a circumstance like that. And then a second example would be back in the 60s when some of the southern states refused to integrate their schools and federal troops were required during the Kennedy administration. So, yes, there are extreme circumstances where this might be called for. This is not one of them, and never should active duty military be used against peaceful protesters. That's a violation of the Constitution.
Admiral, just about 30 seconds here. What did you think of General Mark Milley, the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs accompanying the president in Lafayette Square?
I think it was a mistake, and I think if General Milley had that one to do over again, he would not have done so short of a direct order. I know he is uncomfortable being involved in politics, and he knows that's not his role. I thank God that he did not appear in the photo op on the steps of the church. Let's hope that he can stay out of politics. We need the military to stay out of politics, the active duty military.
Well, Admiral Stavridis, definitely looking forward to reading more of your opinions. Always enjoy listening to what you have to say. Of course, former military commander of NATO and a Bloomberg opinion columnist, extraordinarily decorated soldier as well. So thank you, General, for joining us. So, Paul, it was really an interesting time, and of course, you know, a couple of precedents cited, and I think that moment has passed in this particular, you know, week of social unrest, but it came close at one or 2 points there last weekend to it definitely escalating for the worse.
It was, and I think the Admiral's commentary about kind of mixing politics with the military it's something that he's been concerned about, I know, really for the last several years, and again having probably coming to the fore once again with some of these civil unrest and demonstrations and the use of the military in kind of managing them.
It does seem like this president isn't too worried about what organization or branch he politicizes. I mean, the Fed as well, of course, is something that he likes to bring into politics.
Absolutely. This is Bloomberg.
Sometimes this is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Dear Dad, Happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
The Right Time with Bomani Jones.
While he was gone, Al had some kind of vote to make him the managing. You remember he used to come up all the time in the Raiders game that he was the managing general partner. By the way, don't forget, there was a lot going on in Munich. But you know how tired that man was to come back and find out that Al Davis had strong-armed his team from him while he was gone?
Search The Right Time with Bomani Jones to listen.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
The world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
The Fed action, essentially unlimited quantitative easing.
Companies taking aim at coronavirus vaccines and other treatments.
This could be a lower for longer hit.
Market sell-off glowing global once again.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
It's possible that this is going to be a scarring recession. The Fed is really showing that they're doing whatever it takes.
A lot of people don't expect that the economy will reopen in full.
This is really hitting industrial America, and it's a major crisis.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at the retail business. Macy's is actually reopening 450 stores, and they are increasing their liquidity with a new credit line. We'll dig into those details. Plus, we're going to take a look at a new model that compensates consumers for the personal data that they share. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, the Dow and the S&P have eased off earlier losses as the NASDAQ moves into positive territory. This comes while Apple is climbing. On a news report, the company is preparing to announce a shift to its own processors in Mac computers and not use Intel anymore. Treasury yields are sinking to as low as 0.8%. Gold is up. We check those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is currently down 0.6%, down 18. The Dow's down 0.6%, down 175. And the NASDAQ is up 0.3%, up 30. The 10-year is up 17.30 seconds with a yield of 0.81%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.75% at $37.90 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.1% at $17.2480 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.69, the euro $1.1355, and the British pound $1.2722. Forbearance appears to be working for Discover Financial Services. The CEO is saying that more than 80% of the card company's customers who opted to skip payments ended up making them just a month later. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Bonnie and Paul.
All right, Greg, thank you. That is Greg Jarrett there with all of our Business Flash stories. So now it is time to look at some small caps, and we've had a really interesting rally in the Russell indices. Who better to tell us about it than Dave Wilson?
Had is probably the operative word here, Vonnie, because smaller companies are down a whole lot more than larger ones in today's trading. The Russell 2000 index lower by 2%, and the S&P 500 is only off 0.6%. Energy stocks are the Russell's worst performers. They're lower after surging yesterday. Oil driller Noble Corp, whose ticker is NE, is down 30%, Whiting Petroleum, ticker WLL, is down 26%. And Extraction Oil and Gas, ticker XOG, is also down 26%. And all three stocks more than doubled yesterday, so giving back some of those gains. Fossil Group, ticker FOSL, has fallen 27.5%. The watchmaker is lower after a 6-day rally in which its shares soared 165%. Now, Fossil disclosed late Friday that it reached a deal with banks to ease criteria for a loan. And Conn's, ticker CONN, has dropped 20%. The electronics and home furnishings retailer had a much wider loss for the fiscal first quarter than analysts expected, based on a Bloomberg survey. Well, one of the Russell's biggest gains belongs to Lovesac, ticker Love. The furniture maker and seller is up 29.5%. Lovesac reported a narrower than expected loss.
I can't get over. Sorry, Dave. No. We just can't let this lie. First of all, it must be LOVE, right? Because we all know that LOVE is Southwest. So who calls their company Lovesac?
Well, I mean, this is a company that makes, sort of specialized furniture that, you can kind of rearrange as you please. That's sort of their take. They call them Sactionals.
All right, Dave, I'm just going to mute.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thanks so much for joining us, Dave. We appreciate that small cap report. Once again, Lovesac, that's the stock of the day here on Bloomberg Markets. Let's switch gears to retail. Macy's, making some moves here. I think maybe perhaps trying to get a little bit on firmer footing here. They're opening up about 450 stores. I got a new credit line to kind of shore up their balance sheet. Let's get the latest from Poonam Goyal. She's a senior U.S. retail analyst for Bloomberg Intelligence. Poonam, thanks so much for joining us here. Give us the latest on what's going on with our good friends at Macy's.
Sure, thanks, Paul. So I think, with Macy's, the largest question about having liquidity, they're answering that pretty nicely, having secured over $3 billion in credit just recently at 1.3 prior to that. Against their real estate. So what we're seeing is they just reported preliminary first quarter results, and they have about $1.5 billion in cash. That coupled with the additional financial securities that they have secured, positions them in a good place to keep their liquidity in check and pay off any upcoming debt. They have about $1 billion in debt coming due over the next 2 years. So we think they're in a good position in terms of liquidity. On sales, there's been some cheer on just that stores are reopening and sales are getting better. We at BI don't think that, they will enter the positive territory in terms of positive sales growth until 2021.
Poonam, what about employees? I was speaking yesterday with the union head who had just negotiated the reopening agreement with Macy's. Now, not the new contract, that's still in negotiation, but the reopening agreement, which was a massive agreement with many, many concessions, I suppose you would say, and also things that were negotiated between the two. One of his points was that he doesn't think that everybody is coming back to work.
Yeah, I think, right now Macy's has 450 doors open. There's still a lot more to open. We think given the reduced hours, not everyone will be rehired immediately. And, to say what will happen over the course of the year will really depend on the productivity that they see in the stores, in the warehouses, and even digitally, because what we're seeing is as stores have reopened at the department stores, sales are at 60% levels roughly to last year, and digital continues to be strong. So, when we get to near 80, 90, 100% productivity is when we'll probably start to see much of the labor force at these retailers return.
Poonam, based upon your discussions with investors that you talk to and the executives at the retailers you cover, is there an expectation that this has changed, this pandemic has changed consumer behavior permanently maybe? We'll see some changes in either how they shop, how stores are arranged, hours, is there some big changes coming for retail?
I think so, yes. I think the biggest change will be just an even more rapid rise in e-commerce. So, what's new to apparel retailers this time around is curbside pickup. Traditionally, you've seen that more at the grocers, the mass merchants. Now apparel retailers have begun to roll that out. So as they institute curbside pickup and possibly even keep it post the pandemic, that's going to change the physical real estate that they own. Meaning, I think they'll still want stores, but I don't think the stores need to be as big as they are, and I don't think they need to have still as many stores as they do. So I still stand by my view that we need a reduction in stores, and I do think coming out of this pandemic, as leases are renegotiated, many doors may not open again.
Will they be the doors inside the malls, the ones that are sort of in the higher end malls? You think, Poonam, would they be the easiest to close, or some standalones?
I think it'll be a mix. I think the most risk is at the lower tier centers, whether it's mall or off mall, predominantly mall though. I think those are the retailers that, will take advantage of the current situation and really look to exit those leases at a more favorable term than originally if they were to try to exit those leases.
Will online at Macy's do better because of this?
Yes, I think online will do well in general, irrespective of what environment we are in. Macy's has about a quarter of its business online, and online sales have surged, more notably in April. In fact, we're seeing some retailers call out as much as a 60 to 70% increase in online sales in the most recent month. So we do think online will continue to have strong double-digit increases and even triple digits in certain categories like home and athleisure.
All right, Poonam, thank you. We'll obviously follow this day by day. That is Poonam Goyal of Bloomberg Intelligence covering the retailers. Now, let's head to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. to Nathan Hager for world and national headlines. Nathan.
Bonnie, after more than a week of protest and a raging debate about policing in this country, George Floyd is being laid to rest. The casket has arrived at Fountain of Praise Church in Houston for a private funeral. Later, Floyd will be buried alongside his mother at a cemetery in Pearland, Texas. Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo is weighing in on the police reform debate that activists are calling defund the police.
Please, I urge this country, let's not be knee-jerk. Let's be thoughtful, because at the end of the day, we need to do things that keep the public safe. And that starts with having the policies, their critical policies, be adopted nationwide across all 18,000 police departments, and not just progressive ones.
Congressional Democrats have introduced a series of measures they call the Justice in Policing Act. Some parts of the country are reporting troubling coronavirus trends as they lift restrictions. Bloomberg's Martin DeCaro reports.
One of the first states to reopen, Texas reported its highest number of COVID-19 hospitalizations, close to 2,000, the most since May 5th. Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson says he's worried about recent protests over the police killing of George Floyd.
We've got to make sure the folks who were out there protesting go and get tested.
In Arizona, the state's largest health system has now reached capacity for patients needing external lung machines. Dr. Jennifer O'Hay works in the Banner Medical Center in Phoenix.
We have very packed ICUs.
Coronavirus cases are on the rise in 20 states. Martin DeCaro, Bloomberg Radio.
And South Asia is emerging as a new hotspot. Data compiled by Bloomberg show infections have risen by 27% in Pakistan, 19% in Bangladesh, and 17% in India as cases fall in the U.S. and Europe. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
You've always relied on Bloomberg's strong Asian presence.
You didn't mention any particular areas in China. Let me just go to Hong Kong.
And now you need it even more.
Where are we in terms of understanding President Xi?
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
We're starting to see infections in some of the Asian countries.
Tonight at 6 Eastern.
Do you ever get the feeling some people just weren't prepared?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To protect her home and family in a disaster, Karen was willing to wade through water, mud, and insurance paperwork.
Yeah, I can do this.
You go, Karen! By simply understanding and updating what her insurance covers and doesn't cover now, she'll be better prepared no matter when disaster strikes. Learn other simple ways to protect your home and family before a natural disaster at ready.gov. That's ready.gov. A message from FEMA and the Ad Council.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg Terminal. The buy side and the sell side together, collaborating across markets and countries in real time, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network of over 325,000 financial professionals that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Request a demo at bloomberg.com/professional.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
It's a stock market driver.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care about each other, about our planet, about creating a better world for everyone, and becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Hi, I'm Dan from NatWest Manchester branch. We know life's hard right now, but if coronavirus has affected your finances, we're doing our best to make things easier. If you're a personal customer, you can request a 3-month payment break if you're struggling with your mortgage, loan or credit card. Or if you need help with an existing arranged overdraft, you could get £500 interest-free for 3 months. Remember, every one of us is here to support you. There are lots of ways we could help. Search NatWest Coronavirus.
Eligibility and conditions apply to payment breaks. Overdraft up to your agreed limit if lower than £500.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Dear Dad, Happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Kill O'Neal. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
With millions of podcasts dropping new episodes all the time, how do you keep up with all your favorites? TuneIn makes it easy. Simply head to the home screen and find your new episode section to see the latest additions.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Sponsored by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth number 1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Wall Street hit the brakes today, one day after its remarkable weeks-long rally brought the S&P back into positive territory for the year and the NASDAQ to a record high. Let's see how it's doing here as we check the markets. S&P is down 0.7%, down 22. The Dow's down 0.8%, down 209. And the NASDAQ is up 0.1%, up 13. The 10 years down 15.30 seconds with a yield of 0.82%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.6% at $37.98 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 1.1% at $17.2350 an ounce. The dollar yen, 107.76. The euro, $1.1356. And the British pound, $1.2731. Boeing did not sell or deliver any of its marquee 787 Dreamliner jets in May. That's a reminder the U.S. plane maker is still enveloped in a crisis from the pandemic. Even as its stock skyrockets on optimism that travel will rebound, the Chicago-based manufacturer shipped only 4 commercial jets last month, down from 30 a year earlier. Boeing today is down 3.2%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Craig Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, it seems like every day we are sharing more and more of our personal data with companies, whether it's email addresses or phone numbers and other personalized data. The question is, should we be getting compensated for this data? Our next guest thinks that maybe we should. Neil Sweeney, no relation, CEO and founder of Kili, based in New York City and Toronto, joins us. Neil, thanks so much for joining us here. Give us a sense of what your company is really working on right now. What are you guys doing?
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it. Is that there's an entire economy based on the collection of data, usually unbeknownst to consumers. That's been going on for years, and it's been powering companies to the tune of billions of dollars. The overall value of that data has been increasing and compounding at a very high rate over the last number of years as well. And so what we looked at with the market was that we feel that ultimately consumers should have some optionality, whether it's to have transparency into who's using their data, to be compensated for the use of that data. Because realistically today, when you look at the data market, there's none of that. So you as a consumer don't know who's using your data, what they're doing with it, and how much is being generated from it. We're trying to change that by allowing consumers to link all of their data and put it underneath their control.
Right. Now, so there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, talk to us about the data market, because we all know that companies can buy bundled data. You know, maybe it's ages, maybe it's demographics, and it's cheap, right? You're talking, decimal points on the cent for a lot of this. But are you saying that you're trying to give the consumer control of who they sell to and for what price, or what exactly are you doing, Neil?
Yeah, so the first piece is that you're right. There's a massive data market. It's a multi-billion-dollar market. And, the overall value on consumer data is approximately about $500 per month. So if you ask the everyday consumer, are you aware that your data is being collected? Some will say yes. If you ask them how much data is being collected, they would say they have no idea. And then if you ask them how much money is being generated from that, they would also be able to answer zero. So we think this notion of $500 per month per user is a pretty big number, and it actually comes without actually including the consumer in the negotiation. So ultimately, what we believe is that nothing bad happens with the data underneath the control of the consumer. It satisfies privacy concerns, it satisfies consent, it satisfies fidelity. So we're not suggesting that the world should stop using data, but rather. We think that the pendulum is swung too far, and that all the data that's being actually collected on the individuals today isn't really including them. So we're trying to change that around.
So where is the discussion right now between the users of this data, the big companies, the Googles, the Facebooks of the world, and consumer advocacy groups, and in terms of kind of monetizing some of that data?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's the cliche of oil, of data being the new oil. I would actually say data is actually the oxygen rather than oil. So if you look at those platforms like Facebook, Google, Amazon, and others, they're powered by consumer data. That's the oxygen that keeps them actually going. Without that oxygen, those platforms can't actually continue to grow. So if you look at Facebook, North American users in Facebook are generating $35 per month, growing at an average rate of about 30% per year. If you took that and multiplied it out by the 2.5 billion people inside of Facebook, it starts to get to be a big number. I think the platforms are required by privacy law to allow consumers to go in and remove their data should they want to. But it's not really in their best interest to actually let all of that data leak out of their platforms. The goal of those walled gardens is to keep the data inside of those platforms so you as a brand or as an advertiser keep having to come back to that. The consumer advocacy groups, I think that there's this romantic notion that consumers should own and control all data and that companies should have none of it. I mean, I think that that's a bit unrealistic. I think our stance on this is that we don't believe that big companies should have all the control over the data, nor do we necessarily believe that consumers need to have all the data and the corporations can't have it. But there should be some sort of compromise between the two.
Neil, how exactly does your model work, though? I mean, are you setting up an exchange? Are you saying to me, I put my phone number on this, maybe, eBay type platform, and I receive residuals for the rest of my life? Or how does it work?
Yeah, exactly. So we give you the various different modules to allow you to come in and link various different pools of data. So if you wanted to come in and link government-issued ID, or you wanted to link a banking card or a credit card, that's up to you as a consumer. So you don't have to. And even if you do, you don't even actually have to share it and or sell it. But so we're trying to put all of those controls into the hands of the individual consumer. And if you look at the market, where are all the places that consumer data is leaking? So from a browser, in the social networks, via credit cards and bank cards, these are all the various different pools of data where your data is actually being collected and housed by those individual companies. Our feeling is that you should be able to have a mirror image of that data sitting underneath your control. The byproduct of that is now you have a holistic view of the entire consumer journey. So you would have banking and transaction history, plus government-issued ID, plus social data, plus browsing data, all in one central spot controlled by you. What you choose to do with that really is endless. But one of the things you can do is monetization.
All right. Well, we have a lot more questions about this. We'll have you back very soon. And thank you for joining us today. Neil Sweeney, founder and CEO of Keeley, a new model compensating, apparently, consumers for personal data that they feel like sharing, given that they're going to be sharing it anyway. Do stay tuned. Lots more ahead. This is Bloomberg Markets.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are falling this morning on worries the recent jump in equities has overshot the economic recovery. The global economy will contract the most since World War II this year. That's according to the World Bank. Global GDP could shrink over 5% in 2020, potentially sending millions into poverty. Tech stocks are outperforming today. Apple climbing on a report the company is preparing to announce at the end of the month a shift to its own main processors in Mac computers. That move would replace chips from Intel. Macy's surging after announcing it has reopened 450 stores in some capacity. This shows the department store chain may be bouncing back faster than expected. And the owner of Men's Warehouse and Joseph A. Bank is said to be considering a potential bankruptcy. Tailored Brands was struggling even before the pandemic forced the closing of its stores. Demand for suits is down, with many office workers staying home. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
At Bloomberg, we know a lot of financial experts.
He's a former president of the European Central Bank.
Your Global Financial Warriors is a classic textbook.
A lot of political experts.
If you were advising the President of the United States, what's the thing that he's not doing that he should do?
And lucky for you, we know a lot of science experts, too.
You talked about those reagents which are necessary for the testing.
It's also the behavioral psychological approach.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. This July 4th.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Dear Dad, happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Ready to talk brass tacks on what's happening in Major League Baseball? Turn to the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs for daily statistics, analysis, and commentary.
One team will say, yeah, we're going to keep paying minor leaguers their stipend, and another team will say, we're going to extend the stipend through this month, and then another team will say, nope, we're cutting them off. So are extending it at least through August, which would basically be the end of the minor league regular season.
Search Effectively Wild on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to chat with Mark Klein. He's the president and CEO of Sutter Rock Capital to get his thoughts on the venture capital business. Plus, our good friend Dan Ives, equity analyst at Wedbush Securities. He's going to talk to us about Apple making its own chips and why FANGs will get even bigger after COVID-19. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Paul, stocks have come off earlier losses as a rally in tech shares offset concern over stretched valuations and economic prospects. Treasuries are up. Tech stocks did outperform as Apple climbed on news that the company is preparing to announce a shift to its own main processors instead of Intel in Mac computers. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. Apple, by the way, is up 2.5% at 341.70. The S&P 500 is down 0.7%, down 22. The Dow is down 0.9%, down 240. And the NASDAQ is up 0.25% of 23. The 10-year is up 17.30 seconds with a yield of 0.81%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.4% at 38.06 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 1.1% at 17.2470 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.71. The euro's $1.1361, and the British pound $1.2741. A head-scratching rally in the shares of Hertz Global Holdings lost some steam today, sending the stock lower for the first time in 4 trading sessions. The struggling car rental company quickly tumbled 39% in the first 15 minutes of trading, then rallied briefly for a 4.9% gain. The stock right now is down 8%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett. This is Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Vonnie Quinn on Bloomberg Radio.
Moving to a slightly different asset class now, and that is venture capital. We're excited to be joined by Mark Klein, who's president and CEO of Sutter Rock Capital. Now, of course, some early backing that Sutter Rock did was very profitable. Exits include Facebook, Twitter, Dropbox, and Lyft. And the current portfolio companies include Coursera, Lime, Nextdoor, Palantir among them as well. So clearly some smart guys there with you, Mark, including yourself at Sutter Rock Capital. Mark, give us a picture of the environment right now, because obviously we're looking at private equity, really reining in its horns, if you like. And I'm wondering if the same is true of venture capital. With the market drop earlier this year, did valuations decrease significantly? Are they still at those levels, or are they coming back?
Sure, thanks a lot. Obviously the market, the public markets collapsed at the beginning of the COVID crisis, going down, anywhere between 30 and 35%, depending on what industry, and they've subsequently rallied almost all of them back about 50%. And as you note, NASDAQ making a new high yesterday. On the venture capital side, I think you had a bifurcation. Venture capital valuations tend to lag, and the private valuations tend to lag what happens in the public markets. And when you do have almost a V in the public markets, the movements are actually pretty quick. So there were some cases where companies were in need of financing and did significantly down rounds, but there were others that continued to perform and actually were having up rounds during the last couple of months. What we've seen in the secondary markets is there is a fair amount of selling that has gone on at discounts to prior rounds that had occurred in the last 3, 6, or 9 months. I think those are fairly fleeting, and the opportunity set becomes the ability to move against the opportunity set is pretty rapid as blocks of stock come up for sale, and you have to make a determination whether you want to participate or not, and then they move away, especially when you have equity markets rallying like they did over the last couple of weeks.
So, Mark, one of the areas as we think about this pandemic world that perhaps, may be a little bit of a beneficiary is education technology with this schooling from home. How do you think about that space, and what are some opportunities do you think going forward?
Sure. Well, I actually think that unlike simply a COVID tailwind that some other industries are enjoying, I think you're now seeing a fundamental shift in education and online education. And just bringing it home, the idea of having a college student, and let's just say they're graduating senior starting as a freshman next year, and that you're looking at a private education bill of, call it $75,000 a year, and the first 6 months is going to be spent virtually to go to some very nice liberal arts school. I think the world is going to shift away a bit from that. In the public markets, you see significant performance by some of the online education companies like Chegg, that's almost doubled since the pandemic started, or 2U, which is about about the same. So I do think the market's starting to recognize in the public markets that the need for online education is actually structurally shifting. We're fortunate that we have two of those names in our portfolio, Coursera and Course Hero, both that are experiencing, as you can imagine, and this is documented in public information, extreme, usage of their products and sort of way outside of what they had initially determined from, just general understanding of the marketplace. So I do think that there is these tailwinds and the structural shift will lead to more and more opportunities in the public market for private education companies actually coming public, and there are several of them that are now multi-billion-dollar privately valued companies.
Right, including, I'm sure, Coursera, which is one that, so many people have signed up for. It's still private. You're 45% involved in that. But who wins out here? Because there are many, many great companies. I'm looking at, the peer group of Chegg right now, and you're seeing Bright Horizons. Strategic education is a very interesting one as well. Obviously, you've K-12. Does it depend on what teachers you get? Does it depend on how many people sign up? Does it depend on, what you get with your certificate at the end?
Well, I think, first of all, lumping all of online education or even in one bucket is challenging. On one side, you have the corporate training side, which is a Pluralsight or a Skillsoft. Then you go through, obviously, the K through 12 post-secondary and lifelong learning. And I think in each segment, there are clearly folks that are executing better than others. I think, in fact, Pluralsight announced that they were doing an offering yesterday after the stock has rallied materially during the pandemic. But I think a lot of them have an opportunity to be successful. I think the proverbial butts and seats businesses, I think, are a little harder than the online side. But if you look at the Udemys of the world, Udacities, right. Masterclasses, just did a capital raise. There's plenty of them.
Hey, Mark, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate that. Mark Klein, President and CEO of Sutter Rock Capital, based in San Francisco, on some of the venture capital opportunities out there. And we spent some time talking about the educational technology. And clearly in this pandemic world, as we all have kids at home, whether it's grade school or college, trying to work from home on the educational front is a challenge, to say the least. Right now, let's head down to Washington, D.C. for World and National Headlines with Nathan Hager. Nathan, what do you have for us?
Well, Paul, a top World Health Organization official is now trying to downplay her comment from yesterday that asymptomatic spread of coronavirus is very rare. Maria Van Kerkhoven's remarks sparked a new debate over the transmissibility of COVID-19. Today, in a live event on social media, the WHO epidemiologist says she was referring to 2 or 3 published studies trying to convey what they know about coronavirus, not stating new policy. But that comment has led to criticism from some public health experts. The co-head of Georgetown Center for Global Health Practice says the data overall are overwhelming, that there's at least some asymptomatic spread. More than a week of protests sparked by the police killing of an unarmed black man culminates today in a funeral. George Floyd's casket has arrived. Mourners are gathering at a church in Houston for a private service. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has called for an 8-minute, 40-second moment of silence at noon Wall Street time. That is how long a now fired Minneapolis police officer knelt on George Floyd's neck. His death has led to a pledge from the Minneapolis City Council to dismantle the police department. Alondra Cano is one of those city council members.
We began the process of ending our current system. That doesn't mean there isn't a police department today. That doesn't mean we're abolishing help. That means we're putting ourselves on a path to come up with the answers together.
Congressional Democrats have introduced sweeping police reform measures. President Trump says he may resume large campaign rallies as soon as next week. He put that out on Twitter as recent polls show him lagging Joe Biden nationally and in key battleground states. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our number one priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Pershing Advisor Solutions, LLC. Member FINRA SIPC.
COVID-19.
So I often struggled at school. Once, when we had a maths test, I looked around the room and everyone was just doing it. And I couldn't. And I began to cry. But my teacher came over and said, it might look like one big problem, but it's just a handful of small ones. And you can deal with that. I hear her voice in my head for every problem I face to this day.
Teaching. Every lesson shapes a life. You could get £26,000 tax-free to train as a teacher. Subject to eligibility, selected subjects only. Search Get Into Teaching.
Dear Dad, Happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
The Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Kevin Clark.
If Josh Allen became the 10th best quarterback in football this year, they'd probably win 14 games. Am I wrong about that?
No. If you as a quarterback can't win in the Bills' situation right now, they should not extend you. So many teams, Jets, do not have the information they need to evaluate their quarterbacks based on the teams they built around. The Bills do.
Listen and subscribe to the Mina Kimes Show podcast.
Search the Mina Kimes Show to listen.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone,
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, plays to the 5, touchdown!
Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Who says you can't have a laugh while getting serious about America's pastime? On the daily podcast Locked On MLB, comedian and baseball fanatic Paul Francis Sullivan talks about each team, each pennant race, and everything else in the game, from rule changes and controversies to baseball cards and stadium food.
For those of you who are not familiar with me or the old show, I love to obsess over baseball. I'm talking baseball over the Super Bowl. We had a TV showing the division series during my wedding.
Search Locked On MLB on TuneIn to listen today.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir, it's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games. With Game Replay on TuneIn, you can hear every matchup of the 2019-2020 season so far. And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
It's in breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The S&P moved into the red today, causing a powerful rally to pause that had briefly turned the broad U.S. stock index into positive territory for the year. The tech-heavy NASDAQ gained a bit after notching its first record close yesterday since the coronavirus pandemic sent stocks tumbling. We check those markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is down 0.8%, down 26. The Dow's down 1%, down 278, and the NASDAQ's up 0.1%, up 10. The 10-year is up 18.30 seconds, the yield 0.81%. West Texas Intermediate crude has turned the corner. It's up 0.25% at 38.27 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 1.1% at 17.2350 an ounce. The dollar yen 107.68. The euro $1.13.44. And the British pound $1.27.30. Sources say Kyle Bass is going for broke on a currency trade that has burned bearish speculators for more than 3 decades. The Dallas-based founder of Heyman Capital Management is starting a new fund that will make all or nothing wagers on a collapse in Hong Kong's currency peg. The sources say Bass, best known for his prescient bet against subprime mortgages before the 2008 financial crisis, will use option contracts to leverage the new fund's assets by 200 times. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Vonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting witham.com. Well, some big news out of Apple today, not necessarily a new product introduction or a new phone or anything like that, but certainly news on the back end. They're going to make their own chips. And what does this really mean for Apple and for other players in that tech supply chain? To answer that, we welcome Dan Ives. He's an equity analyst at Wedbush Securities and a Penn State alum, I should know. Dan, thanks so much for joining us here. How big is this news from Apple about their chips?
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's big in terms of, Cook and Cupertino have talked for over a decade about this potential move. And it's really a shot across the bow at Intel and other semi players that Apple's just going to have more and more control of their devices. You've seen it on the iPhone. Now it goes to the Macs. And I think this is going to be a trend you're going to see more and more as Apple looks for more full control over its devices.
So, Dan, also thinking about, do they make chips for their other products as well, or is it just for the Mac?
Yeah, if you look on the processor side, they've done it from a chip perspective in their iPhones, as well as some of their other, core devices. Now, there was a view that this Mac move maybe could have happened 3-4 years ago, but in terms of some of the technology innovations on the ARM side wasn't there. This is probably about a year ahead of expectations if you look relative to the Street's perspective. I view it as an incremental positive for Apple, an incremental negative for Intel, just given what this really says about going forward in terms of how Apple is really viewing the chip ecosystem, especially in their own devices.
Now, we knew this was coming for a little bit of time, Dan, so why is the market reacting now?
Because this has really been something, it's always on the come. I mean, even if you go back to 2005 when Cook talked, and when they were to talk about the grand vision from Apple, But it was thought that this is something from a Mac perspective that really couldn't happen. The fact that they ripped the Band-Aid off and now it's going to be likely announced on June 22nd at the Virtual Developer Conference, it's a surprise. And I think it just shows the innovation that Apple has been taking more and more. Even when you look at some of the 5G battle versus Qualcomm, more and more you're going to see Apple continue to look to own the chips, build it, because they want more control over their devices. And what that says for investors, it's more margins and more cash flow.
It also gives more risk, though, to the company, right? Because if there's any kind of supply disruption, in its own ranks, that's worse than if a supplier has a supply disruption.
No doubt, it does put more risk, but I've about as much confidence in Cook and Cupertino as I do in Sully Sullinger to land an airplane. And I think it comes down to the confidence that Cook and Apple have built with investors. The more control they have more control over launches, over timing, and over even profitability and where they could take it. So I think this is something, at least from an investor perspective, you want to see Apple having more control. And also it's more differentiation versus the HPs, the Dells, traditional PC, given it's not the same chip.
So, Dan, I'm looking at the Apple chart here, another all-time high today. What's the call out there on the street here for Apple in the world of that's likely to be altered for certainly the near term, maybe the intermediate term, maybe even long term?
Yeah, the call, I continue to view it a year from now, there's a $2 trillion market cap. And I think the first step was to get through this COVID-19 dark storm. And you've seen it get there through the services business. That's about $500 to $600 billion, we believe, from a valuation perspective. Now it's the drum roll to just a massive iPhone 12 product cycle with 5G. We think about 350 million of 950 million iPhones worldwide are in a window of an upgrade opportunity. You start to put the math around it, some of the parts. I think this is a stock that has a 4 in front of it. And I think you're going to continue to see this get re-rated. And in our view on FANG stocks and tech, well, we're still in the 6th, 7th inning. Still think there's 20-25% more in this rally as we look at the rest of the year.
What's next for Apple? What's the next sort of launch of products, and when will the consumer be ready to eat them up?
Yeah, in terms of, from a product perspective, we know about iPhone 12. The AirPods, if you look at that, they're slated to sell about 85 million units this year versus 65 million last year. So I think there'll be a new device there that they'll be launching. But the big thing is going to be on services. Right now, the missing piece in the puzzle is content for Apple services on the streaming side, video. I continue to think between now and the rest of this year, they look to acquire a major Hollywood studio to fill that content void, especially in what you're seeing from Disney, Netflix, and others, HBO, Peacock, going after this massive streaming opportunity. I think that's probably the next piece in the puzzle that investors are hoping to see.
Just, Dan, thinking about these FANG stocks here, just kind of ripping once again, what's your thought on kind of just this group overall? It's had such a great run. Give us your thoughts.
Look, my view is that these are safety blanket stocks in a Category 5 COVID storm, which is how they've continued to navigate, and many of them hit all-time highs. But ultimately, I think the second part of that is the rebound. I think the strong have gotten stronger, and you're seeing it from streaming and Netflix and e-commerce and Amazon and social media and engagement with Facebook and advertising and Google. And then you look at Apple, that's one where you have a massive iPhone cycle on the horizon. I still think FANG names lead this market higher, and overall in tech, that's why we continue to think it's a green light to own these names, especially on the second half macro recovery plays, which will be the other leg in these stocks.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dan. Always great to speak with you. That is Dan Ives, equity analyst at Wedbush Securities. And of course, Apple was higher today by about 2.5%. Not the best performer among the tech stocks, but in the S&P 500, it certainly helped. But we saw Advanced Micro Devices up more than 5% today, Paul, and NVIDIA up more than 3% too.
Yeah, it's interesting. The tech stocks getting a lift here, and as Dan has mentioned, they've been obviously the drivers in this market for more than a decade, both on the upside and the downside here. So Apple, another all-time high today, just extraordinary. So coming up will be Balance of Power. We will have that for you. They will drive the conversation forward. There will be a New York Stock Exchange moment of silence at the top of the hour, talking about kind of remembering social injustice, and we will have a couple minutes of that as well, all coming up on Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Interconnect here.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Dear Dad, happy Father's Day. You are my rock, my go-to guy. Whenever I call, you're happy just to listen. You've always been there for me, by my side. I don't know how you put up with my piano playing all those years. Hang on, kiddo. I'll listen in a sec. I miss you. See you soon. Love you lots, Luce. This Father's Day, send love straight to Dad's door with moonpig.com. Download the app today.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man, welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man?
What's up, my brother?
Man, I'm good.
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Extended version of Bloomberg Markets. Right now, we are going to go down to Washington, D.C. There will be a moment of silence on the New York Stock Exchange. But let's go to Nathan Hager down in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, we are waiting for this 8-minute and 46-second moment of silence, Paul, to be brought in by a single toll of the bell of the New York Stock Exchange. 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the length of time a now fired Minneapolis police officer held his knee to George Floyd's neck. Now let's go down to the New York Stock Exchange. Eight minutes and 46 seconds, this bell will ring out, echoing through the halls of the New York Stock Exchange in memory of George Floyd. More than 2 weeks after a now fired Minneapolis police officer, Derek Chauvin, held his knee to George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. All this as the final funeral service is held in Floyd's hometown of Houston, Texas, the Fountain of Praise Church, where a private service is being held. Of course, there have been days of remembrances of George Floyd in his childhood hometown in North Carolina, as well as Minneapolis, where Floyd spent his final moments. He will be laid to rest later today alongside his mother at a ceremony just outside Houston. But of course, the outcry over his death and those of so many other black people at the hands of police has led to this huge movement calling for change, calling for reform of police practices, and now leading to potential legislation on Capitol Hill, calls to defund police from many activists across the country. Floyd's death sparking a movement that's really ringing out across the world, Paul.
Yes, it really is, Nathan. Thank you so much for that. That was Nathan Hager. We were just listening to a New York Stock Exchange observing a moment of silence to express support for equality, justice, and human rights in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. To get a sense of kind of what's going on down in Washington as these issues play out across the country, we welcome Alex Wayne. He's a White House editor. Alex, thanks so much for joining us here. Give us a sense of kind of where the White House is and the Trump administration is right now in terms of its policy for dealing with these growing set of unrest around the country.
Conflicted, I think, is the word for it. So yesterday, the president held a roundtable with law enforcement officers where he actually made some talk about making some mild concessions to protesters. He said police should be trained to behave more gently, I believe is the word he used. He didn't propose anything specific, no specific reforms coming from the White House, but administration officials insisted that they are working on something. However, this morning, the president once again revealed how he really feels about these demonstrators. He tweeted just purely misleading and unsubstantiated claims about a man in Buffalo who was injured when police shoved him while he was protesting police brutality up there.
So it's interesting, Alex. I think we know how the president feels about all of this. How does Congress feel? I know there's a House bill out there about police reform here. Is there really any support in Congress for any type of meaningful reform of police tactics around this country?
I think it depends on what you consider meaningful. The bill that Democrats introduced yesterday would make some important reforms. It would make it would make police more accountable for misbehavior. It would make it easier for people to sue them, essentially. But it certainly does not go as far as many protesters have demanded. It doesn't go anywhere near defunding the police. This slogan that's emerged among protesters. It would not scale back police judgments. Scale back police budgets and redirect money towards social programs or anything like that. And so I don't think protesters are going to be very satisfied with the Democratic bill. On the other side of the aisle, I think Republicans are coming around to the idea that there needs to be at least some sort of symbolic action by Congress. We saw Mitt Romney, Republican from Utah, who was sort of in the outs in the White House these days, nonetheless marching with protesters in Washington this weekend. He tweeted Black Lives Matter. Frankly, I have not seen a lot of Republicans willing to use that phrase in public. So I think that's notable for Mitt Romney to do so. And so I think, hearts and minds are shifting up here, along with national sentiment toward police brutality. And you see polls showing that majorities of white people think that police treat black people worse than they do white people, which is a change from just a few years ago. And so in Washington, the politics of the issue are starting to reflect that change among broader voter sentiment.
Hey, Alex, you mentioned the phrase Black Lives Matter and many Republicans not being willing to seize onto that statement. I think it's probably safe to say that many Republicans and Democrats are loath to seize on the other slogan that many activists are putting out there, defund the police. There's been a lot of debate over just what that means. What's the sense in Washington about what activists are looking for when they say defund the police?
Yeah, it's a catchy phrase that makes a good slogan. But I think worries a lot of people because of the implications. I mean, to take it to its extreme, it means some activists want to abolish police departments, and in fact, I believe in Minneapolis after the death of George Floyd, which of course happened in Minneapolis, the city council has now endorsed kind of, I guess, abolishing the police department there and rebuilding it from scratch. But the nuance of the phrase, I believe, and I'm not an expert on this, and I don't really want to speak for protesters on it, but I believe what they're calling for is for police budgets to be scaled back, at least for police departments to be demilitarized, take away their armored vehicles and their riot armor and their tear gas and their other the other weapons they've used against protesters, and put that funding into social programs that could prevent crime, like education and welfare programs. But I don't think that in Congress the term is really being explored. It's just being used as a political cudgel by Republicans, led by the president. He tried to wrap it around Joe Biden's neck this week, unsuccessfully. Joe Biden came out yesterday and said clearly that he does not support defunding the police, but he does support police reforms, passing legislation that would require them to behave more appropriately with unarmed and peaceful people.
The protests that have come out over the last several days have really shown a light on just how complicated the relationship is between police, support for police, and politicians on both sides of the aisle. Talk a little bit about how this could affect not just the presidential race, but many of the congressional races going forward here. Do you think this is really going to change the narrative in terms of what the issues that are on voters' minds are going to be?
It is really hard to tell. I still think that the presidential race is probably going to turn largely on the economy and the president's handling of the coronavirus outbreak. I don't think the police protests are going to factor a lot into the presidential race, especially if Joe Biden is going to sort of hold himself or wall himself off from the defund the police, the call to defund the police. In congressional races, it's trickier. I know a lot of politicians around the country are trying to, wrestle with how they embrace these protests while keeping some policy distance. Frankly, like I think if you were to talk to Mitt Romney, he would not support defunding the police, even though he supports the protests against police brutality and has endorsed the idea that Black Lives Matter. So I think it's very difficult to say how it plays out in, say, your local congressional race. I feel like it's probably not going to be a big issue in congressional races. I feel like it's going to be a bigger deal, at least right now, on local races, municipal races, city councils and county governments and that sort of thing.
Hey, Alex, is there a sense within, I guess, the Beltway that the White House and the administration is kind of certainly not in front of this situation and may have actually kind of lost a little bit of the ability to control it here?
For sure. I think ever since the Lafayette Square incident last Monday, where law enforcement agencies violently dispersed a peaceful protest across the street from the White House just minutes before Trump made this symbolic walk to St. John's Church to hold up a Bible in front of cameras. Ever since that incident, which the president has been castigated for what happened there, I think the White House has lost control of the narrative and is now kind of playing from behind and playing defense. I mean, there's almost a metaphor for the defensiveness of the White House and this fence that's gone around the complex for nearly a mile around along the streets, a couple blocks away from the White House. And the president has had no public events this week. He hasn't said anything publicly in a few days in the protests. I think I think right now the White House is kind of holed up, hoping that the looting and the rioting subsides, and then the president can resume his campaign for re-election.
Well, we certainly know that this moment of silence, at least, has subsided now as trading gets back underway on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange following 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a pause here in memory of George Floyd. Bloomberg White House team leader Alex Wayne, thanks so much for being with us and offering some insights as we take a moment here to remember George Floyd. Now, let's get a check of how things are going in the markets. Now, Greg Jarrett has that with a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg?
Nathan, we started out the day in the red for this session, but stocks did pare their losses as a rally in tech shares offset concern over stretched valuations and economic prospects. Treasuries did jump. We'll be checking what happened with the NASDAQ in just a moment. But right now, the general markets, the S&P 500 is down 0.8%, down 26. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 1%, down 270. And the NASDAQ is up 0.2%, up 18. The 10-year is up 18.30 seconds with a yield of 0.81%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.5% at $38 a barrel. Let's see, COMEX gold is up 1%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio with the latest in markets.
In Washington.
And I'm Taylor Riggs in New York. Let's get a check on those markets now. And joining us is Kaylee Lyons. And Kaylee, earlier it seemed very risk on, yet the tech sector is showing some resilience midday. You look broadly at the equity market. The S&P 500 is lower by about 0.8%. In some ways, maybe it's no surprise we're taking a bit of a breather here, considering how far we have run. Of course, this index yesterday had erased all of its gains for losses, for the year as of the close. But today we're taking just a leg lower here as markets kind of evaluate the fundamentals and have we run too far, too fast. But you mentioned that tech outperformance, Taylor. The NASDAQ is still higher by about 0.2%, really being led higher by the likes of Apple. It's higher by nearly 3%. That on a report that the company is set to announce it's replacing Intel chips with its own processors for Mac computers. That announcement could happen as early as the next few weeks. And then you also have other tech heavyweights like Amazon, Facebook, all leading the tech sector in particular higher. It's so interesting. We're seeing a total reversal of that cyclical-led trade that we've been seeing in recent weeks. Now it once again is tech underperforming while energy and financials are lagging on the day. And Kaylee, this is what makes markets. Yesterday, all we could talk about was the 10-year trying to hit up against 1%. And then today you wake up and it's fallen back down to 82 basis points. What happened?
Yeah, you're seeing some of that bid come back into the Treasury market. Of course, this is a market that is very much anticipating the Fed's commentary decision tomorrow, what they're going to say about possible curve control, etc. But as you said, the 10-year yield is lower for 2 days now. It's down right around 81 basis points. It's down about 5 basis points in today's session. We'll see as the curve kind of flattens out a bit, but we had seen really aggressive curve steepening in recent weeks. So we'll see what the Fed has to say tomorrow. I think the market is kind of waiting and watching at this point, Taylor.
Thank you, as always, there to Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons. Kevin?
The eyes of the nation and the world are fixed on a church near Houston, Texas, where a private funeral service is set to begin for George Floyd 2 weeks after his death at the hands of Minneapolis police officers. This also comes as Republicans on Capitol Hill are raising the prospect of defying election year predictions to work with Democrats across the aisle to overhaul the nation's police laws. For more, we're joined now by Bloomberg government congressional reporter Emily Wilkins. Emily, we're watching these images of this funeral, but I'm very curious, can Republicans and Democrats find common ground to get to some type of legislation?
Democratic leaders are absolutely hoping so. Just now, Congress Majority Leader Steny Hoyer was talking on the phone with reporters, and he really emphasized how much he wants to work with Republicans, how he hopes that Republicans offer their own feedback, how they're able to work together in committee. Remember, this bill was introduced yesterday. They still need to go through a hearing process as well as a markup process. So it's going to be a while, and probably not until the end of this month at least, until we see this bill being voted on. There is still opportunity for it to change and for Republicans to perhaps start to support it.
So, Emily, but when I spoke with a couple of Republicans in the past couple of weeks, including 2 members of Congress, they said that on the issue of defunding the police, non-starter, even Biden says non-starter on defunding the police, but on the issue of looking into cops who have a record of racism, that's something that they would be able to get on board with. Is there any appetite to just look at that specific piece of this puzzle, at least to just get some type of bipartisanship through?
It's always interesting when bills get negotiated in Congress because a lot of times there is concern, and this comes from both sides of the aisle, that they're going to pass the one thing that everyone agrees on, and then everything else is never going to get done. You have seen Democrats, they are cognizant that defund the police is not exactly sort of a popular slogan with many people, even though a lot of people note that defund the police does not necessarily mean do not give any funding to the police. But Democrats have put forward a number of other sort of maybe middle of the road issues that they're hoping they can come to an agreement on. Things like bans on the chokeholds that were the ones used on George Floyd, bans on no-knock warrants that were used in the killing of Breonna Taylor. So they aren't going sort of to the far left calls of quote-unquote defund the police. They have put forward a package that they are hoping that they can get some support on from Republicans.
Emily Wilkins, Bloomberg government reporter, our thanks to you for all of your excellent reporting, to you and your team. And we turn now to Mark Crumpton from Bloomberg First Word News. Mark?
Kevin, thank you. As you mentioned, George Floyd will be buried in his hometown of Houston, Texas today. Mr. Floyd's death last month sparked nationwide protests over racism and police brutality. His funeral is getting underway at this hour. It will be private. On Monday, about 6,000 people attended a public memorial service to Mr. Floyd in Houston. President Trump has lashed out at that elderly protester who was shoved to the ground and seriously hurt by police in Buffalo, New York. The president tweeted that the 75-year-old man was a, quote, provocateur who exaggerated his fall. The president did not offer any proof for his claim. Mr. Trump is hoping to get back on the campaign trail soon. He tweeted today that rallies will be starting again soon. They've been on hold since March due to the coronavirus pandemic. Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden has begun to resume events, but he limits the number of people in a room to practice social distancing, and he wears a mask. President Trump has mocked the former vice president for wearing a mask. Mr. Trump does not cover his face in public. The coronavirus is spreading faster in South Asia than anywhere else in the world right now. Over the past 24 hours, infections have risen by 27% in Pakistan, 19% in Bangladesh, and 17% in India. That's according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Pakistan and Bangladesh also had their single biggest daily spike in fatalities. Countries across South Asia have started to ease their virus lockdowns in the hopes of reviving their economies. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Mark. And still ahead, we'll dig into the Democrats' police reform bill and the prospects for bipartisan change, all ahead of the November elections. And we do this with Jamil Jaffer of George Mason University. All of that next. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Business is constantly evolving.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Emma, the UK's most awarded mattress in 2019. Try it out for 200 nights risk-free. Made in the UK. Go to emmamattress.co.uk to order now.
Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm Taylor Riggs in New York.
And I'm Kevin Cirilli in Washington, D.C., with House Democrats now pushing their police reform bill and Republicans aiming to release their own plan for overhauling the nation's policing laws. Where are the areas of common ground? on this highly charged issue. For more, we're joined now by Jamil Jaffer. He is founder of the National Security Institute at George Mason University School of Law. He's also, of course, a senior vice president at IronNet Cybersecurity. All right, Jamil, we just heard from my colleague, Emily Wilkins, on Bloomberg Government's team that there actually are areas of bipartisanship. But can those areas of bipartisanship get inked into legislation and signed into law by President Trump?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin. One of the challenges is that Democrats control the House. They'll obviously be able to get a bill that they want through. It'll go to the Senate. The Senate will be controlled by Republicans. Will inevitably come up with something different. The question will be then, how do they reconcile those differences, and what can they do to get a president on board who's clearly expressed a view of the role of the police and potentially the military in these responses that I think is different than where both Republicans and Democrats in the House and the Senate are today.
I want to forget about the politics for a second, because there is pressure on suburban Republicans to get something on this issue through. But right now in Houston, Texas, where the memorial service is occurring for George Floyd, and we just came out of the New York Stock Exchange where an 8-minute moment of silence in recognition of George Floyd, this just appears to be almost a watershed moment, does it not, for there to be some area of bipartisanship? What would that look like?
It does, Kevin. I think watershed moment is exactly the right term to use. I don't think anybody expected the reaction we saw from the community and communities across the country and the popular response from corporations and from the public sector. We have seen a dramatic change in just days on this issue. And so I do think there is for bipartisanship. Look, I think that the question of the use of body and dashboard cams, I think, is sort of a minimum starting point. The question about chokeholds and what you do on those things, appropriate training, accountability for officers, and the like are all things that I think are clearly bipartisan. We'll find some consensus. The details of that, the questions on the harder questions like no-knock warrants and making other things federal crimes, I think are much harder questions that have been long fought. But I think there's a lot of room for bipartisan compromise in getting the bill to the president's desk that he can and should sign.
Jamil, what is the case for national federal legislation versus the state-by-state approach?
Well, Taylor, I think that one of the issues here, obviously, is that we've seen that this is a national problem in terms of institutionalized racism, right, and the behavior of some members of law enforcement. And so it's not just a localized problem. And I think you've seen it through the nationwide protests, right? You've seen a national response, and I think that we will ultimately see federal legislation that uses the fact that the federal government provides a tremendous amount of money to localities in terms of police funding and the like, and they'll condition that funding on the adoption of certain changes. They'll also make changes to federal law. So I think there is an opportunity here, Taylor, for some changes to federal law. At the end of the day, though, you're right. This has to be implemented locally, and that's where we got to make sure that we have good standards and common sense reforms locally, and not complete defunding. That simply doesn't make sense either, Taylor.
I want to pivot here because given that we're in the middle of a pandemic, we've been talking a lot about mail-in voting versus crowding at polls. What are some of the fraud and concerns around mail-in voting? Are those legitimate?
Sure. Look, Taylor, there's been a long-standing concern about mail-in ballots. We've expanded them dramatically over the years in order to help our military overseas and the like. And those ballots we tend to think are sort of more secure because they're coming from military outposts, the like, coming straight to the federal system. There are concerns that ballots might be stuffed through mail-in balloting. And so these are concerns that have been expressed for years. With the massive expansion we're seeing today post-COVID of mail-in balloting, that's what's raising the concerns, right? It's much easier if you have somebody presenting a photo ID at a voting booth to verify they are who they say they are than it is to figure out who's mailing in ballots and whether they're being mailed as a group and multiple people filling them out and then sending them in. That's obviously a huge concern, and we've got to figure out ways to address that concern, Taylor.
Let me pick up on that with what Taylor was talking about, because, we're 5 months out from Election Day. Shouldn't we have been preparing for mail-in voting years ago if this was the direction that our country was going to move in?
Well, Kevin, you're exactly right. Look, obviously we've had significant changes in mail-in voting over the years. We have now same-day registration, which raises a lot of concerns in same-day voting. After the 2000 elections, the Bush v. Gore debacle, we saw the ability to cast provisional ballots. So there's been a lot of changes, but you're right. You would have thought we'd be ahead of this. Now, look, let's be fair. Obviously, the COVID thing has been a dramatic change for all of us working from home and, being social distancing and the like. So, it's a different environment, and we'll see how this plays out. I do think the question will be, if we do have a massive change in favor of mail-in voting, which it looks like we will, what's that going to do to people's concerns about whether they had a valid election, you know? And I think there will be people who will contest these elections as a result, potentially starting at the top of the ticket, and that could cause huge problems as we go post-November into the inauguration period.
Well, our thank you is always there for all that perspective from Professor Jamil Jaffer of George Mason University School of Law. And a quick note, today marks the launch of Bloomberg Green magazine. It's a quarterly collection of our best reporting on climate change. The magazine is available on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg terminal. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S. stocks are mixed with the NASDAQ posting a gain. The Dow is falling 288 points, S&P down 25, but the NASDAQ is up 21. Apple is leading a rally in tech shares after announcing plans to announce a shift in its own main processors and Mac computers. Shares of Macy's are climbing after it reopened some 450 stores. But as many as 25,000 stores in the nation could close permanently this year. That's almost 3 times as many as last year. Retail and tech data firm Coresight Research says most of the closures are expected to occur in malls. And the Federal Reserve has expanded its Main Street lending program to include more small businesses. It's lowering the minimum loan to $250,000 and extending the term to 5 years. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners. Gathering world-renowned experts takes effort.
We have the perfect person.
Asking them the right questions takes Carol Masser and Jason Kelly.
Is this possibly early indications of a second wave?
Bloomberg Business Week.
Silicon Valley will be forever changed by this pandemic. What's your take?
Are they paying off their balances?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern.
That is a significant shift.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm Taylor Briggs in New York.
Then I'm Kevin Cirilli in Washington, D.C. For Bloomberg First Word News, we now go to Mark Crumpton. Mark?
Kevin, Taylor, thank you very much. A top World Health Organization official is walking back her comments that asymptomatic transmission of coronavirus is very rare. During a live event on social media today, Maria Van Kerkhove said her comments stem from a very small group of studies, including unpublished data. She said she was just answering a question, not stating a WHO policy. Van Kerkhove's comments on Monday revived controversy over how the virus spreads. In Iran, the coronavirus outbreak shows no signs of slowing down. The number of daily new cases in Iran remained above 2,000 for the 14th straight day. Iran has had more than 175,000 cases and more than 8,400 deaths. Signs of normalcy are returning to Paris. The Eiffel Tower will reopen on June 25th, following the longest shutdown since World War II. Visitors to the landmark will only be able to access the tower via the stairs and will have to wear masks. It has been closed since March because of the coronavirus pandemic. The Eiffel Tower is the second most visited tourist site in Paris, behind the Louvre Museum. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. I'm Mark Crumpton. This is Bloomberg. Kevin, back to you in Washington.
Thanks, Mark. Let's turn now our attention to the unemployment picture in the United States. Our very own David Weston spoke with U.S. Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia about the surprise rebound in jobs in May.
It was just a stupendous jobs report. As you said, it in a sense beat expectations by 10 million jobs. We added 2.5. A lot were in leisure and hospitality, so it was restaurant workers coming back to work. We added a lot in manufacturing, which was a little bit of a surprise. Construction, retail. But let me just mention a couple other things that make this report, I think, even more encouraging. First, as you know, these surveys relate to the middle of the month. So this is where we were in mid-May. A lot of states were just starting to reopen now. So we know that you ask where the jobs are. There'll be many more jobs added over the next few weeks in other states that get deeper into their reopening. And then we know there are other industries where we didn't add back as much as we might have expected to, but we'll definitely bring those jobs back. Healthcare lost 1.4 million jobs in April. Those jobs will come back. So it's a really, really good start on the reopening.
Congress enacted, the president signed something called the Payroll Protection Program to try to make sure people either didn't lose their jobs or got hired back. Is there any way of knowing what effect the PPP may have had on these jobs numbers?
We think the PPP was helpful in keeping people on payroll, attached to the employer. Hard to know exactly where it factors in. The Small Business Administration, which administers the program, estimates that tens of millions of workers have gotten the benefit of that program by staying on payroll. And one of the things I've always liked about the program the most, and we've talked about before, is that it poises workers to come back quickly. They're still connected to their employer. The employer still has workers ready to go. So the program, in addition to just getting money to people who need it, should also help us reopen more quickly than we might otherwise have done.
Back when I ran an operating unit at the Walt Disney Company, ABC News, one of the questions I'd ask when things like this happen, nice, surprising numbers, is it timing or is it real? That is to say, are we just moving up some numbers that otherwise we'd see a little later? So does this indicate something about the size of the overall recovery, how many jobs we can get back, or is it more it happened earlier than we thought it would?
I think it's a very good question, and I think it's both. It definitely happened sooner than we expected. What this shows is that the rebound was already happening faster, bigger than projected. But I think the fact that we put back 2.5 million jobs so quickly is encouraging for the long haul. A number that I've looked at closely the last couple months is how many workers say they were put out of work temporarily. And that number remains extremely high. For April, it was just about 90%. And for May, it was about 85% still think that they're going back to the job they had. So that's really another sign that just as we came into this downturn by a completely different route than any other economic difficulty we've had before, we can come out in a different and I think faster way.
This is a great number. I mean, everyone agrees this is a great number. At the same time, we have a long way to go. 2.5 million is almost a drop in the bucket compared to the tens of millions who've lost their jobs here. What comes next, do we think, in terms of getting jobs back, and how long will it take to get us back to where we were?
You're right, David. We still have ways to go. Nobody's proclaiming victory at this point. We're still working with the states, for example, to help them get those unemployment payments out to people who are entitled to them. That remains a priority. I have been asked a number of times whether I thought we could get back below 10% unemployment this year. I now am even more confident that we can do that. I think this we'll have, I think, a report for the month of June that's at least as positive as the one we saw for May. And I did want to comment on another number in the report. It's been observed that there was a very, very slight uptick in unemployment for African Americans, and that's true. But when you drill in, what you find is that actually about nearly 300,000 African Americans found jobs in May. It's just that they entered the workforce in even larger numbers. And one of the things you look for when you're looking for recovery is increased labor force participation. So that's actually another good sign in this report. We obviously want that unemployment number coming down, but we see that African Americans did get jobs and are coming back into the workforce.
That was part of David Weston's interview with Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia. It is time now for Stock of the Hour. We're looking at the movie industry as California unveils plans to reopen the state's theaters. Kaylee Lyons is here with more. Kaylee, what do we know?
Yeah, Taylor, I want to focus on one stock in particular as it relates to this, and that is Cinemark. Of course, that is one of the biggest theater operators in terms of number of screens. It has about 6,000 of them across the country. The stock is lower by nearly 9% today. Now, part of that is what we're seeing with the broader equity market. Some of the year's most beaten down stocks getting beaten down once again as this rally kind of takes a break here. And when I say beaten down, I really mean it. The stock has lost about half its value so far this year, as have many movie theater operators because of the coronavirus shutdown and the resulting theater shutdowns. So because of this pandemic, domestic box office revenue has absolutely plunged. It's actually down about 2/3 this year from its peak, only $1.8 billion through yesterday. And Cinemark, for its part, saw revenue fall 24% year on year in the first quarter that it reported last week. Potentially, though, positive catalyst is coming for it. Its peers as economies begin to reopen. Cinemark is initiating a multi-phased reopening beginning on June 19th. And of course, the market in particular we're focused on today is California, because yesterday, California state public health officials submitted guidelines for Governor Gavin Newsom to approve in order to resume operations. Granted, those guidelines do say theater attendance would need to be limited to 25% of capacity when they do reopen, but still one analyst over at MGM Partners says that guidance could improve the chances of the U.S. actually having a summer movie season. He said allowing theaters in L.A. and San Francisco in particular to reopen might be a major factor in Hollywood studios feeling comfortable enough that the country is going to want new feature film content. That means we could see Warner Brothers release Tenet in mid-July and maybe Mulan finally coming out shortly after that.
And Kaylee, I wanted to talk, because we were showing a chart earlier about all the year-to-date losses and, of course, more losses today. What is it going to take to push those stocks back in the green, given yesterday, of course, we were noting the S&P 500 had erased its losses for the year. What is it going to take to get those stocks back in the green?
Yeah, of course, it's a really good question, Taylor, because even with the dramatic rallies we've seen off the lows for many of these beaten down companies, it's still nowhere near enough to recover from the intense pain we'd seen throughout the duration of 2020. I think for theaters in particular, it's going to be a question of when that box office revenue begins to stabilize. Our analysts here at Bloomberg Intelligence don't think it's really going to recover in the second half, because even once theaters reopen, the capacity is still going to be lower, and people might still be scared to go to a theater. Even if there are extra health precautions taken, they might not be super excited to go back and sit in a room with a bunch of other strangers.
Yeah, you could say that. Thank you, as always, there at Kaylee Lyons. Kevin?
All right, coming up, Congressman Dwight Evans, Democrat of Pennsylvania. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio.
What began in China.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
When we're stuck indoors all day, we might find our energy bills creeping up uninvited. The cheeky rascals. And none of us need that right now. But by simply switching your energy with Money Supermarket, you could save £280 on your bills. It's just one small step towards money calm. Money Supermarket.
honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Pulls over a man into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
Rise to the 5! Touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunningham to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Ready to talk brass tacks on what's happening in Major League Baseball? Turn to the Effectively Wild podcast from Fangraphs for daily statistics, analysis, and commentary.
One team will say, yeah, we're going to keep paying minor leaguers their stipend, and another team will say, we're going to extend the stipend through this month, and then another team will say, nope, we're cutting them off, so are extending it at least through August, which would basically be the end of the minor league regular season.
Search Effectively Wild on TuneIn to listen.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 2013, Rafael Nadal wins another French Open title, making him the first man to win the same Grand Slam title 8 times. To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Question about a Democrat or Republican. I think at the end of the day, police play a very important part in our economic, in our commerce. So I'm fully one who understands that we need them and we respect them, but also you cannot have situations where they are abusing the citizen. That is not acceptable. And for those who take that particular kind of position, that's an unacceptable position to take.
Congressman Dwight Evans is joining us. He's a Democrat of Pennsylvania and represents parts of Center City, Philadelphia. Congressman, let me ask you this, because you've been working on these issues even long before the most recent incident that has occurred. But we're hearing so much new terminology, for lack of a better word, in the past several days, like defund the police. What does that specifically mean? Or to abolish police departments? What does that specifically mean? Because when I interview people, I get a different answer depending on who I ask.
Well, first thing is, I don't ever believe you're going to abolish the police or defund the police. I believe that the police have a very important role in our society. And when you think about it, the question is, that's a very difficult job. But it's a job that, at the end of the day, like anything, those of us in Congress or state legislators or city council, we have to work together. The police can't solve the problem by themselves, but they also can't be abusive. So at the end of the day, I don't think it should be, Democrats for abolishing police and Republicans are for police. I think that's the wrong argument. The real question is how we grow and move our economy. That's the real question that we should be focused on. And safety and security is a part of this economy. So I don't think you could have a situation where, those who beat up on it, that's unacceptable. I don't see anybody who doesn't want the police to be available to them. At the end of the day, we do have to make changes. We should not be fearful of change. We should not be fearful of change. Change should be something that we embrace. And that when we see something is occurring that is not acceptable, the package we have introduced yesterday shows, in a sense, we have no fear of change. And we hope that it can be bipartisan.
Congressman, talk to me a little bit more about the specifics of what a bipartisan bill looks like. Is there enough support that it doesn't include defund the police, but yet starts to look at some of the police brutality and some of the tactics? Is that enough to get both sides of the aisle on board?
Well, this bill doesn't include anything with defunding. It basically talks about ideas that makes grants available to individuals who may have creative ideas, right? All the ideas are not in Washington, D.C. At the end of the day, there may be people who have around community policing. Those are things we should embrace. In terms of the chokehold, that should be unacceptable. That should not be an acceptable act that a person takes who's on the police force. Training is very essential. In any workforce we have, we want to make sure people are trained properly. We shouldn't be fearful of training. So training, upgrade, things of that nature to allow. And then diversity. Diversity is extremely important in any police force. You must have the inclusion of the citizens that you are providing policing to, from the top leadership, from commissioners, superintendents, the sergeant, all those people, because your police force should reflect the community that it comes from.
Well, the Congressman, speaking of diversity, I mean, there have been so many reports that have come out that have shown that minority groups are the hardest hit economically during this pandemic. Are you concerned, Congressman, that the mom and pop shops in West Philly are not going to be getting the financial assistance that they need coming from the Fed, coming from banks, because it's going to big businesses? And how do we prevent that?
Well, you raise a very good point. I think when you talk about preventing, you talk about using CDFIs, you talk about using minority business organizations. I think you raise a very legitimate point. And at the end of the day, it's in our self-interest. I call it self-enlightened leadership, because you want the economy to grow and you want it to be an equitable and a diverse economy. It's in our collective interest. That's why you want police officers properly trained, focused on making a difference in our community. It's not us versus the community or the police, vice versa. You want to find a way to how to get people to work in their collective interest. And the collective interest is making sure that business grow. You have African Americans and entrepreneurship, development. You see it. I can point out a number of examples of various businesses who have shown They know what to do. They know how to do, but they want to work together. And that's why I said we should lessen the temperature that's been raised around this situation and try to focus it on what's most important for the people. That's why we're here. We're here for the people. We're not here for ourselves. We're here to find a way that we can do things that work for the people.
Well, it's a busy time, so we always appreciate your perspective. Our thank you there to Congressman Dwight Evans, Democrat of Pennsylvania. And today marks the launch of Bloomberg Green magazine. It's a quarterly collection of our best reporting on climate change. The debut issue explores ways stimulus spending enacted in response to the COVID-19 virus can be used towards climate recovery. It also features an introductory essay by Michael Bloomberg on why the coronavirus crisis will be a turning point for climate change. The magazine is available on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg Terminal. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and Radio.
Working from home, take a little more time for breakfast. Tom Keene.
How will this pandemic change your NASDAQ?
Jonathan Farrow.
When you look at that sector, some of these companies won't exist, will they?
And Lisa Abramowitz.
They've only continued to increase the delinquencies and defaults.
Crunch data topped with fresh world news. Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. And now, watch us on Bloomberg Television.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Tomorrow, we will hear from Fed Chairman Jay Powell. When the central bank announces its latest rate decision, markets are pricing in speculation that the Fed will impose curve controls to keep front-end yields in check, with U.S. Treasury markets behaving like yield curve controls are already here. For more analysis, I want to bring in Ira Jersey, U.S. rate strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence. Ira, does yield curve control start tomorrow, or are some analysts and economists thinking maybe it's a September issue?
Yeah, so I don't think that they'll actually enact it tomorrow, but I think that they'll kind of lead the way into it. So I think that Jay Powell in the press conference will probably be asked about it, and he'll mention that it's one of several options that the Fed may consider in the future. But yeah, the August or September meeting is probably more likely just because they have to think about it a little bit more, get staff input, and basically have a plan for how they're going to implement such a program, because it's a little bit different than quantitative easing in that it's more open-ended, and they have to figure out, what levels of yields are they actually going to control. So I think all of those things are going to be part of the discussion and discourse over the next couple of months.
We always love getting perspective from Ira Jersey, U.S. rate strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, but as always, we're having some technical issues with the line there, so we want to make sure to come and get him back when we can. But Kevin, I'm fortunate that I'm joined here by you right now. I know you're on politics, I'm on Fed. Let's try to marry the two of them together. Very interesting what we just heard from Ira about perhaps waiting until some of September, perhaps. I was listening, though, to an analyst this morning, Subodh Roger Rajapa over at SocGen. And it might seem a little wonky to say this, but there could be some speculation that yield curve controls by keeping a cap on yields would mean that it is cheaper to fund all this debt that the Treasury is issuing. If yields spike up, our debt costs surge out of control. So that's sort of the marriage that we're starting to see between some of the fiscal and the monetary stimulus that you and I continue to talk about.
Well, Taylor, not even that, but I was just speaking with a source yesterday who said that it's very likely that Treasury Secretary Mnuchin is going to get that topic tomorrow when he testifies before the Senate. And I think even more broadly, what you're noticing in the past several days is this collective sigh of relief coming from many in the administration, including Mnuchin, including Larry Kudlow, as well as others, because of that jobs report on Friday. However, when I was speaking with Robert Shapiro, who's a previous advisor to Democratic presidential candidates like Obama and Clinton, they're scratching their heads and they're rolling their eyes because they don't really share the optimism in the economy. So a lot of different back and forth. But I just got to say, Taylor, I mean, switching gears, what a moment to have the New York Stock Exchange have those 8 minutes of silence at the start of the hour to coincide with the memorial service for George Floyd.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And with less than a minute left, Kevin, what is your take on this? Has this really been the key focus in your Washington, D.C.?
It really is. And in fact, I do think that there are Republicans, even in rural districts, people like Congressman Denver Riggleman, who want to see something done. They would like to have this be some type of bipartisan moment. But, the politics of this, as we've unfortunately seen, are very, very difficult.
Well,
Thank you, Taylor.
Sure hope that you get past the politics on this.
Yeah. Absolutely. And coming up on Balance of Power, we're going to continue this conversation on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we'll talk to Congressman Dan Beyer of Virginia. And later today, I was speaking with former White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Citadel founder Ken paid more than $100 million for a canvas by Jean-Michel Basquiat, the late black artist who focused on issues of race and inequality. Values for Basquiat works have soared since his death in 1988. 3 years ago, a Basquiat painting fetched $110.5 million at Sotheby's, setting an auction record for an American artist. LVMH named Frederick Arnault, son of the founder of the luxury goods maker, as the new chief executive officer of Tag Heuer, its largest watch brand. Extel's 157 Tower was an icon of Manhattan's ultra-luxury boom and gave birth to a street now known as Billionaire's Row. Now the skyscraper has set a new record for biggest resale loss for a luxury condo. The 88th story full-floor apartment near the top of Manhattan's 157 may have postcard views of Central Park, but just changed hands at a 41% discount, a record $19.4 million loss. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
You're living in a world built on science, political and economic.
You've got to believe the labour market gets hit.
Computer and medical.
Clarify where we are on a test.
It all makes a difference.
What do you think needs to happen in terms of governmental response?
And it's all here.
He expects the virus to peak quite a long time from now.
Get your science straight.
The hand washing campaign, is this actually a good strategy?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Dave Wilson with the Market Drivers Report, focusing on American depository receipts. ADRs are down more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is lower by 1.3%, and the S&P 500 is down 0.6%. ADRs of European oil companies are lower as crude heads for a second day of declines. BP is down 3.6% in U.S. trading. UK rival Royal Dutch Shell's two classes of ADRs are down about 5%. France's Airbus has fallen 8.6%. The French government unveiled a rescue plan for the plane maker and its suppliers that's valued at about $17 billion. Airbus's ADRs had risen for 6 straight days and gained a total of 48%. European airline ADRs are dropping as U.S. peers also pull back. British Airways owner IAG is down 6.8%, and Air France KLM is down 7.2%. Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific Airways has risen 5.3%. The carrier is selling $4 billion of shares and warrants, primarily to the city's government, and receiving a $1 billion loan from a government-linked entity. Cathay Pacific's largest shareholder is Hong Kong's Swire Pacific, whose ADRs are also up 5.3%. And that's your ADR report. I'm Dave Wilson.
This is Balance of Power.
Everybody in the world has one common enemy, and that's to win the war against this virus.
The first thing you do is listen to the medical professionals.
Those people that lost their pay, we want to see that pay continued.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
Our priority is the health and well-being and the lives of the American people.
We want to make sure that we are continuing to support our hospitals.
We've unleashed our most potent weapon of all, the courage of the American people.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
I'm Kevin Cirilli, Chief Washington Correspondent for Bloomberg Television and for Bloomberg Radio, in for David Weston, and a lot to get through this hour as the memorial service for George Floyd is underway in Houston, Texas, and a lot. And meanwhile, just within the last hour, there was an 8-minute moment of silence on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. So this, as Democrats in the House of Representatives have introduced legislation on policing reform. And we're going to get a preview of that all throughout this hour. Joining us on the line is Brendan Buck. Brendan is a partner at 7 Letter. He is also a former senior advisor to the former House Speaker, Paul Ryan. Brendan, as you have conversations with Republicans, is there a bipartisan appetite to get something over the finish line?
On police reform, yeah. I mean, I think there's certainly an appetite. The issue is always devil in the details. When you get down to what we're actually talking about, I'm a little more skeptical that they're going to get across the finish line. One, you have a president who clearly is not interested in police reform or doing anything that is going to shake up police departments across the country. You know, you saw his tweet this morning, basically floating a conspiracy theory about the police officer situation in Buffalo. Pretty despicable. So I don't have a whole lot of faith that he's going to be leading any effort when he's against something that makes it tough for Republicans. But it has been a remarkable moment politically. I do feel like there is very clear bipartisan support for doing something. But it's one of those issues where the something is not something that people really have spent a whole lot of time talking about in recent years. So when you get down to the details, it could be a little tougher.
So what would it look like? Where are the areas of common ground?
I think the immunity is the big one. That's where you've got sort of the libertarian side of the Republican Party with Democrats. That's allowing police, taking away the police's immunity to sort of do things because they're officers. I think there's bipartisan support for that. The issue that this is going to run into, whether you're talking about that or any other issue, is a lot of these issues are largely governed locally. They are agreement by agreement, city by city, with police departments and their unions. They are governed by their mayors. And so there is somewhat limited reach into what is doable. And so I think that's where I think you're going to see the most action on this, is probably more at the local level, where you've already seen in Minneapolis, their city council take action already. These things are moving. There's demand for it. So I think there's going to be action. I'm just a little skeptical whether it's going to be Congress that is going to be the one bringing the most meaningful action.
All right, Brendan Buck's on the line. He is a partner at 7 Letter and former spokesman and advisor to House Speaker Paul Ryan. As you look at the conversation and how you alluded to this, Brendan, in terms of how the administration has responded. I mean, you're a Republican. You've got Colin Powell, who's saying he's voting for Joe Biden. You've got Mitt Romney marching with protesters and using the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Is there now an open disagreement with how President Trump has handled this?
I don't know if it's open. I think it's notable that certainly there is privately. I don't know that this is the moment that everybody talks about every few months. Is this the moment where the party sort of breaks with him? I think it's notable that the people that have been breaking with him are largely former political people, former office holders for Mitt Romney, who very much has decided that he doesn't have any need to be on Trump's camp. I still believe that the politics are such that anybody in elected office still needs to be with the president. Their voters will demand it. There is no political upside to leaving him. And that is the basic principle that has been driving this for years now. So I don't see that changing anytime. But, I don't think that members of Congress are particularly excited. I mean, I think you're already seeing them dodging and not wanting to talk about the tweet from this morning. I think that members of Congress, even Republicans, have been very moved by what has happened over the last week or so. And I think they wish they had a president that was willing to embrace the moment and bring change. But he's leaving very, very little doubt about that.
All right. As you look at the appetite even more broadly on economic reform, do you think that there will be some type of, is there agreement? Are Republicans willing to have another round of economic stimulus coming before the August recess?
Before the August recess, I think so. The way I look at this is what brings people together to get a deal. At this point, the sort of economic challenges at large haven't been enough to force people back to the table yet. And certainly the jobs report from last week didn't do anything to bring people to the table. So when I look sort of down the road, what does bring people to the table? And I think that's the expiration of unemployment benefits, the expanded unemployment benefits that run out at the end of July. You've got a lot of Republicans saying we don't need to do anything, we're reopening, the economy is on an upswing, but I think it will be really hard for Congress to just allow those to flat out expire and have no further deal on UI. So I think that's what brings people together. I think there will be some type of agreement based around that. The question then becomes, if unemployment is the thing that brings it together, how much weight can that carry? How many other things can you throw on there? And I certainly think that the benefits or the politics of this benefit Democrats. But the issue is Democrats are asking for a whole lot more than Republicans. And so there aren't a whole lot of things that Republicans want that Democrats could bargain to get on their side. Republicans have talked about liability reform, but that's largely it. So then you've got all these other issues, whether it's state and local money, healthcare dollars, maybe an extension of the PPP program for small businesses. There's a lot of stuff that people talk about, but I just don't know how much weight you can put on the UI before it sort of collapses on itself. So I think there will be a deal. I think it will not be until July because that's when those benefits expire. But they have to do something. They can't leave all these people the reality is there was a good jobs report, better than expected, but we still got an enormous number of unemployed Americans, so they're going to have to do something.
Can I ask you something totally off topic in the couple of minutes that we have left? I was reading. There's so much in the media. We've been focusing on the how COVID-19 and the pandemic is impacting President Trump and Biden. But we haven't really had this open discussion about how it's impacting down ballot races. And I was doing some reading on this, and from a state level, it's hard if you're not an incumbent to campaign right now because you can't really go anywhere. You can't crisscross a state. And for someone like a Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who, was facing some pressure, he now finds himself in a much more comfortable position. And I'm just curious for your reaction to that and how this is impacting down ballot races, because on the one hand, issues of national concern like police brutality, like what's going on with the economy is very much at the forefront of the conversation. But on the other hand, it has also impacted the way candidates can campaign.
Yeah, I think in the House, it certainly benefits incumbents. As you said, it's really hard to get anybody's attention right now. There's not even hasn't been a lot of political news in general, let alone local political news about issues that challenger candidates want to talk about. There are a number of other dynamics that this has caused. Advertising dollars are cheaper, but fundraising is harder. So I think a lot of it breaks even, but what it comes down to is it's just really hard to get anybody to notice you. And so down ballot, that helps incumbents, which in the House obviously helps Democrats. At the same time, you have certainly seen some slippage in the Senate Republican standing. They can't lose more than 3 seats. And in Arizona and Colorado, the numbers have not looked great. Senate's, those are statewide, obviously, a little more ability to draw attention to yourself and run a high-profile campaign. I think there's just so much still unsettled out there that it's hard to really draw any big conclusions about what's going to happen, other than just really hard to get a message across right now.
All right, Brennan Buck, good stuff, buddy. Partner at 7 Letter. He's the former spokesman and advisor to House Speaker Paul Ryan. And coming up, we continue this conversation with Virginia Democratic Congressman Don Beyer. That's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio. I'm Kevin Cirilli, Chief Washington Correspondent for Bloomberg TV and for Bloomberg Radio, filling in for David Weston. This is Bloomberg.
Reopenings.
Is there a likelihood that we have a sustained recovery?
Requirements.
Lawmakers have passed sweeping legislation.
Returns.
The president signed an executive order.
Bloomberg Daybreak with Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
We continue our Bloomberg Radio team coverage.
Everything you need now.
Let's head to Washington now.
Bloomberg Daybreak. Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern. On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg. The world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
COVID-19.
This is a message from the government about the next stage of controlling coronavirus with NHS Test and Trace. To protect your friends and family, testing and tracing must become a new way of life. If you have symptoms, you need to get a test immediately. Don't leave home for any other reason. If you test positive, we will contact you to trace people who you might have infected. From now on, if you're told you've been exposed to an infected person, you must self-isolate for 14 days. Play your part and do the right thing so we can safely return to a more normal life. Go to nhs.uk or call 119. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
There's a reason flash storage is called flash storage and not electronic non-volatile computer memory storage. From quick and efficient data retrieval to instant scalability, everything about IBM flash storage is fast. It's also cloud-ready and surprisingly affordable, with a recommended monthly price of £310 for 24 terabytes of all flash. Order by the 30th of June and pay nothing for 90 days. Find out more at ibm.biz/flash offer.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Get your cook on with Asda, with Uncle Ben's rice 250 grams for just £1. And our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
At Lloyds Bank, we know that money is a concern for a lot of people during this time.
I'm really worried about the business. I'm worrying about you. And I think that's changing me. And I'm worried that somewhere along the line you might not love me anymore.
Oh, that's not true. Whatever's playing on your mind at the moment, Lloyds Bank, in partnership with Mental Health UK, can offer you support and advice. Visit lloydsbank.com/mentalhealth.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear